Hello there, people, and welcome to another episode of Friday Flight, the listener feedback show for the Flightcast. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. All right, people, we've got to get right down to it because we have a doozy of a feedback show here today. And it is in no small part due to the fact that after weeks of us talking about Dorsey-sized emails, the man himself, Anthony Dorsey, has returned with quite possibly his biggest email missive yet, because it's been a minute and he has a lot to get caught up on. And that's in addition to all of the other emails that many of you have sent for this particular week. A lot to talk about. So I'm not even drinking. I don't have a beer. And part of the reason for that is because I didn't go out and get some new beer or get any of my old reliable. So we're just going to postpone that portion of Friday Flight for this particular week. And we're going to dive headfirst into these emails. And let us begin where we customarily begin every Friday Flight, with an email, a series of emails, if you will, from Mr. John R. His first one titled, I am the Homer in the bar meme. All right, let's see what he's got cooking for this one. John R. says, first, number one, when it comes to following trends, I sure have a tendency to fall behind. He says, I have to admit I didn't know anything about Sinners before you and others online have been buzzing about it. I was watching a commercial for it with my brother and some of his friends during WrestleMania. It's an interesting premise, he says. Great Depression-era horror movie, and this is the fourth collaboration between Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan, I believe. Fruitvale, which is the Oakland Bay Area Rapid Transit, a.k.a. the BART station, I picked up my girlfriend at this past weekend, oddly enough. All right, that's an interesting segue. But he says that, Creed 1, Black Panther, and now this, correct? Yes, that's true. Ryan Coogler has done 5 feature films. He's directed 5 feature films, and yes, those are the 4 that have featured Michael B. Jordan. And technically, Michael B. Jordan was in the 5th one because that was Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, and he is technically Killmonger. Does technically make a return appearance and nothing much but a cameo in that film, but he is still technically in it. He's just not in a big starring role like in the other ones. But either way, John says, how would you sell me on the film? I haven't seen it yet. Is it something akin to Jordan Peele's horror thrillers? I've only seen Get Out and Nope, he says. Also, I'm sorry about how the movie news media outlets are treating this movie's box office performance. Ever since BVS, I've noticed that people will spin a narrative that's convenient to the colloquial perception. $874 million isn't a flop, and I don't believe Sinners will flop either. Yeah, so first of all, the media narrative, no, a lot of that is already getting spun in the other direction because they took it on the chin from, of all people, some of the most unlikely sources like Ben Stiller, who called out Variety's bullshit-ass headline with respect to, oh, it made money, but it's got an asterisk. Still got a uphill battle for profitability. No, it's institutionalized racist bullshit, to be honest with you. And they got hammered for it, and so they flipped the script and they talked about, they can't deny that the success is there. We got 70 millimeter IMAX theaters that are selling out, and granted, there aren't that many of them, but the fact that 70 millimeter IMAX theaters, across the country are selling out for this, people are going in droves. It is becoming a hot ticket even in its second week. I'm very curious to see what it does this particular weekend. They're not even predicting that The Accountant 2, which opens this weekend, is going to beat it out. They're saying that Sinners, likely is going to stay in the number 1 spot. So the media reporting, as much as they might want to drag it, it isn't dragging the performance of this film whatsoever. So it is what it is. There's always going to be, like narrative spinners. Yeah, again, the BVS example you bring up is a perfect one. There are people to this day. In fact, somebody, a post I saw on Threads, from that Phil Barker commented on that I also quoted. There's still a narrative out there that the general audience disliked BVS that much, and like you said, 874 million is not a flop, and certainly is not indicative of the general audience didn't like it. And but all the spin, right? The second week drop off, the Rotten Tomatoes score, blah 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 blah, right? All of that, the fact that the studio changed course, right? All these narratives and all this rationalization to try and get us to believe that the general audience didn't like that movie and wasn't interested in what the original plan for Justice League was. It's all bullshit. It's all just regurgitated revisionist history, and no, it's ridiculous. But at the end of the day, no, I agree with you. I don't think Sinners is going to flop at all, and that bullshit ass break even number where it's got to make double, 2 times its production budget. Yeah, whatever. It probably will make more than that, but we'll see. But either way, I don't think it's going to affect the performance of the film. As far as selling you on it, John, I mean, I'm not here to sell people on movies, to be honest with you. But what I would tell you is that it is definitely, in my opinion, as somebody that has I've seen all three of Jordan Peele's films. I've seen Get Out, I've seen Us, and I've seen Nope. The only one you've missed is Us. So you're not. I mean, you've seen two out of three of Jordan Peele's theatrical films. The difference with Sinners is that while there are many things about it that I would put in the same category as Jordan Peele's films, it just goes harder and it pulls less punches, and there's a lot more history and there's a lot more depth and there's a lot more layers with respect to this. I don't even know that it's really fair to just qualify it or quantify it rather as a horror movie. It is much more than that. And I will not lie to you, John, it is the type of film that, quite honestly, anyone that watches the movie can get the layers and can get a lot out of it. The people that will get the most out of it is black people. It's similar to Get Out, similar to Nope, probably as well. Although Nope, I would say, is probably a film that is geared more toward not just black people, but minorities in general, with respect to its subject matter. But it is a culturally relevant, extremely thematically loaded horror slash dramatic thriller in that regard. And I don't know, it incorporates so many different genres, and it does so many different things. It's difficult for me to tell you one or two definitive things to try and sell you on seeing it. If you're interested in seeing it, go see it. If not, don't go see it. I mean, that's all up to you. It's all subjective. I will tell you that it is one of those moments that I had in the theater that was just a seminal moment that was like, transcends a lot of the standard cinema that we watch. It is a deeper film, it is a more exploratory film, and it has themes and layers that will be deciphered and discussed for a long time. It's the type of film that they will write essays about. I'm not joking. It's the type of film that will be studied and examined, and a lot of the stuff that was in, a lot of the symbolism that was in the movie, I didn't even catch until I started reading the discussions people were having about it on social media. That's the best that I can tell you as far as any type of sell job. But it is up to you, John. If you were interested in a film like that, then go see it. If not, then hey, that is your business. I'm not gonna come at you for any of that. Like, some people don't like horror movies. Some people don't dig vampire movies, and I actually saw some responses from people that said, hey, we don't want to, they liked the movie, but they never need to watch it again because they're not into the horror. They're not into that aspect of like the film genre in that regard. So it is what it is. But yeah, transcendent experience. That's the best thing I can tell you, John. A transcendent experience at the theater for me and many others. So that was the first question. Second question from John in this first email. He says this follows up from the previous question as well as last week in regards to disgrace. All right, let's see where this goes. He said, there was a time when Grace Randolph and John Campea were people that I liked watching. While they were beefing with each other over BVS, the ironic thing was they both liked the movie, and those were the primary reasons I watched them. He says, in a sea of negativity, they were one of the biggest two corks in the ocean. Interesting. The reason I stopped watching Grace Randolph, he said, was because she kept changing her story about things, and she kept spreading misinformation that directors debunked to her. She seemed like Lois Lane at first, but she really is the Cat Grant of Scooper Madness. Oh, interesting analogy there. He says John fell off the wagon a long time ago for a lot of similar things, or he fell off the wagon for him a long time ago for similar things. He says he was one of the few that felt Zaslav canceling Batgirl was the right decision. He's also very aggressive with the theatrical versus streaming perspective. I admit I did watch him a few times after his mom passed, but I stopped watching again. I have no interest in watching either of these two again. I'd rather watch Nostalgia Critic, because while Doug has disliked Man of Steel and BVS, he said he loved Zack Snyder's Justice League and has been trying to redeem himself after Change the Channel. Do you think Campea and Randolph professing their like/love to BVS was the easiest way to get people like me invested in their channel? Yeah, absolutely, I do, and most certainly do I believe. Do I believe that they conned you? That's what you're asking me, I think, John. Do I believe that they conned you and many others that are fans of BVS into watching them? Absolutely, yes, I do, because I think they're both grifters. I think they're both con artists, and I think they're both bigots. Truthfully, and Grace Randolph. For people that don't understand my context for calling Grace Randolph and/or John Campea bigots, here's my context. I will explain it to you. Go look up what Grace Randolph said about Halle Bailey being the Little Mermaid. Go look that up. Go investigate that. Okay, that's where that comes from, among other things. And then go look up John Campea saying the N-word on camera. Go look that up too. That's where my perspective on both of these people changed greatly in that regard. And, that's beyond all of the other disinformation and misinformation and stuff that they've been peddling. I just watched a video earlier today because I'm still a member of Dave the Film Junkie's Patreon. And I didn't see this clip on Threads, thankfully. I feel like I've done a masterful job lately at like cultivating my social media algorithm, not only on like BLUESKY and other places, but also like going back to Threads and Instagram. There's just a lot of stupidity that I'm not seeing. I didn't realize that there was this clip floating around where John Campea said he thinks it's more likely that the Batman 2 gets canceled, the Batman Part 2, that is. And I see this in, because I get email alerts from Dave the Film Junkie's Patreon. So he broke it down and, revealed that, it's a conversation that Campea is having on a show with Robert Meyer Burnett, who's another non-classy individual that I just, I don't have enough adjectives to describe that person. And I really hate that he's connected to my favorite franchise of all time, Star Trek. But at any rate, it's a conversation where he's hemming, Campea's hemming and hawing, like, I don't know what I can say because he was told something and he was told that he could say it, but he couldn't go, but he didn't want to go public with it, and they're trying to, and I hate when people do that shit. Because to me, that is the height of a grifter. That is the height of a con artist. If you got some information to spill, if you got some tea, if you got some stuff to say, don't tease people. And when I say don't tease people, I don't mean like, don't like hold like there's a principle in like advertising and marketing called like hold the date hostage, and what they mean is they will wait until the end of a particular piece of marketing to give you the information that you're looking for because they want you to watch all the way through. That's not what he's doing. He's stoking the fire. He's being an antagonist. He's trying to get attention is what it is, right? He was told something, he claims, and he's hemming and hawing like, I don't know if I should tell you. I think I'm going to tell you off camera. That bullshit, right? And Dave basically roots this out and exposes that what it really was whoever spread that clip around social media, probably somewhere on X, because Dave is still on X, I am not. But whoever was spreading that clip around cut off the beginning part where he was asked if it's more likely that the Batman Part 2 gets folded into the DCU or that it gets canceled. And his entire answer that he was hemming and hawing over, the thing that he didn't know if he could say in public, is because he was answering that he thinks it's more likely that the Batman Part 2 gets canceled than it gets folded into the DCU, which I 1,000% agree with. I don't think there's a chance of that folding into the DCU at all. I really don't. And this does go back to a little bit of because you've asked about this before, John, and I had said before that I think James Gunn has his own plan for what he wants to do with Batman in the DCU, and whoever he hires, whether it's Andy Muschietti or whoever it is that directs The Brave and the Bold, it's going to fall along the lines of that plan, and the casting is going to go in that direction. It's not going to be Robert Pattinson. That, and in addition to, they have no interest in folding Matt Reeves' Batman Epic Crime Saga into what they're doing in the DCU. It's all about creative freedom in that regard. And the people that are still clamoring for this idea that the Batman Part 2 is going to get canceled and the DCU and Pattinson's going to join Cornsweat in the DCU, it's selfishness. It's just as bad as the toxic selfishness of the Snyder Cutters, of the Snyder Cut cult, the Snyder cultists in that regard, and also the anti-Snyder cult who can only see past, who can't see past their own selfish desires, right? It's the same stupid shit. You're not allowing James Gunn or Matt Reeves, in this case, the creative freedom that they, that Zack Snyder never got. It's hypocritical, right? And I'm not saying you're saying that, John. I'm saying the people that keep clamoring for that are saying that. But whoever edited this clip cut off the important part and, got everybody, or at least the people that were sharing this all over the place, according to what Dave was saying, got them all in a frenzy and got them all upset for a variety of reasons. And it's all con artist tricks, right? It's all, whoever cut that clip, whoever cut the context out of that clip, operates the same way that John Campea and Grace Randolph operate. They're looking for shock value, they're looking for your attention, they're looking for clickbait, and they don't care what lie they spin to you to get it. And so, yeah, most certainly, John Campea and Grace Randolph grifted you into watching their channel. And it was the easiest way to get people like them invested. It's the same reason why hate marketing works so well on YouTube, because the easiest way to get eyeballs is to get people angry and riled up. Because they want to be angry and riled up, because they like being miserable pieces of shit as they walk the earth among us in that regard. And it's really sad and depressing that that is the case at times, but unfortunately, such is the world that we live in. So yes, absolutely, they are con artists, and enough talking about either of them. Let's get to your third question. You said there was a common phrase I've seen people say back in the day whenever they refused to watch a movie. Quote, you couldn't pay me to see this movie. Oh, yes, I've seen that many times over the years. He says, I've definitely seen to DCEU boo birds say this, like after Man of Steel, they say they couldn't be paid to see BVS, or after BVS or after Studio Squad, you couldn't pay them to see any more after those three. I've seen other people say this too about other movies, he says. I think some of them saw them in secret, but I'm sure some honored their vows too. Do you think they really mean this, or do you think it's just hyperbole? Like, Ray, if I offered you $1,000,000 to watch the Sonic movies despite refusing to watch them, would you take the money? I'm sure you'd take 100,000 to watch an MCU film at a drive-in, lol. I had an anti-MCU friend say he would never watch an MCU movie, and I said, not even for $1,000,000? To which he replied, no, I'm not a whore. Yes, he is, John. He's a flippin' liar. He's one thing. He's either a liar or he's a dumbass. Okay, because here's the thing: if you came to me, like the Sonic movies is a good example. Thank you for bringing that up because for people who don't know, I have been very reluctant to watch the Sonic movies because I don't like how people on social media claim that as a victory for them bullying the studio into changing Sonic's design. And it has nothing to do with me liking I don't like the old design. I do think that the new design the design they went with is better. I do agree that it was an improvement. What I don't like is that there are fans that take credit for that as, oh, we bullied the studio into doing what we want. No, that's bullshit. And it's just as stupid as the Snyder cultists, right? Who are like, we bullied Warner Brothers into finally giving us what. No, you didn't. What happened was you demonstrated that there was an audience for the material and they went ahead with finishing the project so that they could have content for their fledgling streaming service at the time, HBO Max, now Max. That's what really happened. But this idea that you're going to get this ego because you think you bullied the studio into doing what you wanted, that's the height of arrogance, and I have no time for that shit. And so because of that, I've neglected to see the Sonic movies because I'm not interested in watching anything that people are going to champion as, successful bullying of anyone. And granted, the idea of talking about, well, you can't bully a movie. No, I realize that studios, in theory can't be bullied. Although one could argue that they were bullied by Rotten Tomatoes and all the critics into torpedoing the DCEU by making Justice League. That could be an argument there. But at any rate, this is why I haven't watched the Sonic movies because, and I've said at some point I will. I'm just not in any type of hurry because I don't like how that whole situation went down. And I realize that many people they've told me like, oh, it's more complicated than that. It's this, it's that, or whatever. Okay, I get it, but on the surface, I'm just not in a hurry. It's on the list. But John, if you handed me like if you were like, listen, the second you watch those movies, $1,000,000 goes into your account. Psh, I'd have already watched them. You kidding me? Because I'm not a moron. I'm not an idiot. And anybody that gets on their high horse and says it, like your friend who said he wouldn't watch an MCU movie, not even for $1,000,000, and he says, no, I'm not a whore. Okay, then you're an idiot. Then you're a complete moron. You are a waste to society at that point. And that may seem like a strong statement, but you lack poor judgment if you are unwilling to take $1,000,000 to watch a flippin' movie, right? Like, if someone came to me, like, we're going to talk a lot about race in this particular feedback because we have a lot to response for sinners, John. So I'm going to throw this out there. This may also be seen as an extreme example, but not really. Google the movie Birth of a Nation by D.W. Griffith. There are a lot of technical reasons in terms of filmmaking that this movie is heralded as a classic, but it is a highly, extremely piece of racist material, like propaganda material for the Ku Klux Klan, right? Like, historically speaking, that's the context of Birth of a Nation. I've never seen it. I've never been in a film class that has had me watch it for anything. If somebody offered me $1,000,000, like, because I have no inclination to see Birth of a Nation because of its subject matter, I really don't care about, like, the technical prowess that it had back in the day or what D.W. Griffiths was doing that, like, revolutionized motion picture type. I don't care. I don't want to see a racist movie about the Klan. But if somebody offered me $1,000,000 to watch it once, I'm taking the money. Because, again, I'm not a moron. I'm a functional, logical, human being that realizes if I have to suffer through a couple of hours of bullshit, even racist propaganda bullshit that I know won't change me, right? Like I know that that film isn't going to radicalize me. I'm not all of a sudden going to become anti-black if I watch Birth of a Nation, right? It just like I know that Sonic isn't all of a sudden going to turn me into Dr. Robotnik if I watch those three movies, right? As long as I realize that watching a movie for a couple of hours is not going to damage me in that sense. And I will take the $1 million and I will put that money to good use in that regard. And if you can't suss that out, if you're somebody that's really going to argue that you're not a whore, because you won't watch a Marvel movie, the MCU, that's an idiot. That's someone that I question should be a friend, John, because people like that are not logical people, and they don't make good decisions in life, because that's a stupid decision that they're making right then and there. That's insane to me, right? So I guess to answer your overall question, you couldn't pay me to see this movie. It's absolutely hyperbole. Most of those people are flat out liars. And it's to say, if you want to sit there and tell me that all those people that, they couldn't be paid to see BVS or After Studio Squad or whatever, right? And they didn't see any of the other movies, they saw all of them. And methinks thou dost protest too much, right? The more that they protest, the more I'm certain they watched all that shit. And they paid money for it because, again, as I've said, they want to see it, they want to hate watch it, just so that they know exactly what to specifically whine and be miserable about. So no, I don't buy for a second anybody that tells me you couldn't pay me to see this movie. Whatever, okay? The people that really believe that are the people who are asked that question once and then they give that answer and then that's it, because they're just not interested. Like, there are people that are just not interested, but people that are angry, people that are defiant, oh, they're the first ones in line. Absolutely. There's no question about it. They are massive hypocrites. I 1000% believe that. So, you know what? That's no, absolutely not. And again, you offer me $1 million on the spot to watch all 3 Sonic movies, they will already have been watched. And I would do full FLITE review episodes on them. I would break down Jim Carrey's performance in all 3 films. I would talk about the animation. I would bring up the controversy. There is so much I would do for $1 million with respect to the Sonic movies in a heartbeat. Seriously, because money talks. And I'm not a whore for that. I'm a smart person. I'm an intelligent individual. I'm a logical person that recognizes the capitalistic world he lives in. That's what I am. I'm a rational individual, not a moron on social media that talks a bigger game than he actually spins. My bark is not worse than my bite. My bite is just as bad as my bark in many cases. So I'll just leave that where it is in that regard. No, absolutely not. Anyway, all right, now on to John's second email. Okay, so he said this is a joke that he sent. He said it was optional depending on appropriate level. I think this is appropriate, John. I don't think this is a bad joke. He says he was on a live stream for a pro wrestling pundit and someone sent him a super chat of perhaps one of the funniest jokes I've ever seen. The joke goes like this. I saw 2 mimes having sex. They did the most unspeakable things to each other. That is funny. that is hilarious. It's dry humor, right? It's a dad joke. Yes, the 2 mimes having sex seems inappropriate, but no, it's a dad joke. This is absolutely a slightly less appropriate dad joke. That's all. And it's only because the mimes are having sex. But that's the point of the joke. They did the most unspeakable things to each other because, I don't have to explain the dad joke. At least I hope I don't have to. But no, that's perfectly fine. That's definitely cable level with respect to content here, John. So here, how about your third email for this week? This one's titled, Ooby-Doo, I want to be like you, but I can't always walk like you, talk like you too. Interesting. He says, for whatever reason, I have been in the minority. I haven't been all that excited for Thunderbolts. I don't know if that's that big of a minority, John. I haven't seen a ton of buzz in real life for Thunderbolts. I think people are just going to see it just, because it's there. But either way, he says the trailers didn't wow me. They were good, but I didn't go gaga over them like I have seen with people on social media. Although these are just 10% of the audience, I can't tell what the other 90% interested are feeling. It's probably more nuanced because they don't know who Sentry is and recognize some of the characters from previous MCU projects, so they probably have a moderate interest to a similar level of enthusiasm. From the early fan screenings, he says there's emphasis on how it deals with physical and mental health issues. That's interesting, I guess, I don't think it's the first comic book film to tackle that issue, but hey, I'm glad the consensus is it's working for people. He says, "Why am I like this? Why am I Homer in the lesbian bar? Maybe my bias for DC has made me feel jaded and harder to like Marvel," he says. "It's not like I haven't seen a trailer that I didn't like before and ended up liking the movie. Maybe that's what will happen here. I just hope that this scenario happens because it helps the genre more than it doesn't. Thunderbolts, Superman, and Fantastic Four First Steps all received the trifecta," he says. "Profitability, goodwill from the audience, and least important, goodwill from critics. I couldn't care less about critics, but unfortunately the indoctrination of fans trusting critics makes it a pain to talk about with people. What about you? Where's your enthusiasm level at for Thunderbolts?" Well, if I'm being honest with you, with respect to the three MCU films coming out this year, by default, it's probably the one that I was least excited for. But I can't say that I'm really excited for any of the MCU films. But it doesn't matter. I'm the outlier because I'm part of that 10% that's going to see them no matter what, and not just to maintain my streak, but because I watch Marvel movies. Like I go to the theater. Like even before the MCU existed, I saw Daredevil. I saw both of Tim Story's Fantastic Four movies. Like I've been going to see Marvel movies in the theater for a long time, like longer than the 17 years that the MCU has been around, right? All the X-Men movies, Ang Lee's The Hulk, not The Hulk, but Ang Lee's Hulk with Eric Bana. So I'm not, I'm the exception to that rule in that regard. I will see Thunderbolts because I am intrigued by it. I mentioned a few weeks ago that I was trying not to compare it and call it Marvel's version of Suicide Squad, but that is what it looks like to me, especially with the Sentry stuff. The Sentry thing with the shadows kind of reminds me of Enchantress, truthfully, and the like the creature, like the effects that they had with the dark and the shadows and the smoke and whatnot in that movie, right? In Studio Squad. So, but to me, I mean, I have interest because it's part of the MCU, and I'm intrigued to see exactly how it works. But I can't tell you that I'm like enthused. I'm not like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to see Thunderbolts. No, I don't feel that way at all. But I will see it next week. Most certainly, I will. But yeah, I'm not necessarily enthused by any of the MCU films. If we're talking about comic book movies this year that I have any like heightened enthusiasm for, would probably be Superman, and that's really more. It's really more of an intrigue to see how this goes, to see how the DCU launches, to see how things are, what the tone and setting of the universe is starting with that film. But I wouldn't say enthused. No, I don't think enthused is, I think that's too strong of a word for me. I am intrigued. I'm interested to see all of them. And I think that's fine. They don't have to be, we don't have to be enthused to see these movies. And you don't have to be enthused to see it. I mean, if you're interested, you're interested. If you're not, you're not. I mean, it's really not that big of a deal, truthfully, with respect to that, and the success and failure of these films is not going to hinge on like, how you feel about it or whether you see them or not, John, right? Because again, we're part of those outliers. We're part of that 10%. We're not part of the general audience. And so it's going to come down to how interested is the general audience in seeing a story from a group of people that they largely don't know and won't know, like they don't know them as a group. And the only way they'll really know them at all is if they've been paying attention to all of their appearances in phases 4 and 5. And that's a mixed bag, right? Because with respect to phases 4 and 5, the most successful films have been the sequels, right? Like pretty much every sequel or team up in phase 4 and 5 has been what has succeeded. So that's Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, 900 million. Black Panther Wakanda Forever, over 800 million, right? Those are sequels. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, over 800 million. That's a sequel, right? And then you got Spider-Man No Way Home and Deadpool and Wolverine. Those are your 5 most successful phase 4 and 5 MCU films. So what is it in those films that's going to draw people to see Thunderbolts in that regard? Is it really going to be Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Valentina De Fontaine? I don't know. I'm not sure about that. And Black Widow didn't fail. Like Black Widow, none of the other movies necessarily failed, if you will. I mean, I know Quantumania is considered a bomb, and so is the Marvels financially in that regard. But is there enough in those other, like as far as where Yelena comes from, and does Yelena have enough of a fan base already? Like is the general audience that interested in Florence Pugh enough from seeing her in Black Widow and Hawkeye and wherever else she has appeared to see her here? Like, is there enough of a draw there? I don't know. I think this is a mixed bag. This is definitely an experiment, right? This is let's see what happens with respect to this one. At least that's where I'm coming from. And I'm not, I'm not downplaying it. I'm not saying that I won't enjoy it. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying I think that it's the riskiest of the three projects. Because Captain America Brave New World wasn't that big of a risk. I mean, especially considering that it's the fourth Captain America film, technically third solo Captain America film, as far as I'm concerned, subjectively speaking. Fourth, technically, with respect to title. But at any rate, Anthony Mackie, Harrison Ford, it's like, okay, there was a bit more juice there. And then I definitely think there's juice for Fantastic Four. I think Fantastic Four, not just because of the cast, but just the fact that it's another Fantastic Four film, the first one in the MCU. I think both of those movies potentially have more juice than Thunderbolts. And again, that's not to say that Thunderbolts is going to be a bad film. It's just, I don't know how much hype there is behind it in the general audience perspective, right? Because we're going to see it. On some level, we're going to see it, or we're going to decide not to see it. And it's not going to make that much of a difference one way or the other in that regard, as far as the total box office, the total success, if you will, financially of the film. But yeah, I mean, it's all right, man. You don't have to be all that excited for every comic book film, especially if they're going to keep putting 3, 4, 5, one of them out every year. You can pick and choose. The general audience did that, right? I mentioned earlier with respect to the whole situation with the DCEU. I've talked before about how in 2023, when people want to cite how all the DCEU movies failed that year with the possible exception of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, I'm the first one to remind everybody that there were 8 comic book movies that came out that year, 4 from DC, 3 from Marvel, and 1 from Sony. And the 3 that the general audience decided to turn out for was Guardians Volume 3, Across the Spider-Verse, and Aquaman the Lost Kingdom. All the rest of them bombed, whether it was Marvel or DC, right? It wasn't just The Flash and Blue Beetle and Shazam Fury of the Gods. It was also the Marvels and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. Those all came out in the same year. So Marvel and DC had a tough year a couple of years ago because they flooded the marketplace way too much. And the general audience said, we're not seeing all these, right? So it's okay if you're not all that excited for Thunderbolts, John. It's perfectly all right. I guarantee you're not in the minority. I know what you're seeing on social media, but I guarantee in the vast scheme of things, you're not in the minority. It'll be interesting to see what this film does next week. It will. Hey, maybe it catches lightning in a bottle and it turns out to be a massive hit. I don't know, because it is technically a team-up. It's not a team-up of characters that we're familiar with, like Spider-Man or Deadpool and Wolverine in that regard. So we'll see. We will see next week exactly how it turns out. But you're okay to not be that excited for it, John. So at any rate, thank you as always for your feedback. Always great introspective questions, good sir. All right, let's move over to Amr Zadan with another email missive this particular week. He says, hello, I hope you're doing well, Ray, and of course, sending good vibes to all the FLITEcast listeners too. Yes, same to you, Amr. Hope everything is good over in your neck of the woods for sure. He says, I haven't been up to much this past week, but I do have some updates regarding Star Trek and also my thoughts on Daredevil Born Again Season 1. I couldn't talk about it last time since my last email was a pretty lengthy one, he says. Hopefully this one isn't. Yeah, Amr's his entire email last week was about Season 4 of Star Trek The Next Generation, which I thoroughly enjoyed that email. That was fantastic. I loved going through his watch updates for that entire season. It was great, and I can't wait to see what he has to say about Season 5. But before getting into that, he does say, I haven't been watching much Star Trek this week. Life got in the way. But I've managed to watch the first 5 episodes. I also wasn't able to watch the recently released episodes of Andor for the very same reason. Yes, because I am caught up on Andor Season 2 so far, people, so just, I'll give spoiler warnings, when we get to that point if anybody sends in that feedback. But yeah, we're in full spoiler conversation alert for that show as well if you haven't seen the first 3 episodes of that. But Amr says, before I get started, I wanted to acknowledge Alex's request last episode, Alex De Silva, and say that I'll gladly and happily adhere to it. I'll be leaving my thoughts to Star Trek at the end of the email. I'll talk about it after I share my thoughts on the other stuff we were watching, like Andor, for example, when I eventually start watching it. If my email is Star Trek only, like my last one, he says then I'll make sure to mention so at the beginning of the email. I'll mention whatever I'll be talking about at the start so you'd be prepared and not have anything spoiled. For people who don't know what's going on here, Amr and another one of our listeners, Alex De Silva, are both watching Star Trek The Next Generation for the first time. But Amr has blazed past the pace that Alex is on. Alex tends to watch an episode or 2 every week, sometimes 3 or 4. Amr binged a whole season like a week or so ago. And whereas, it took a minute and Alex is in the middle of Season 3, Amr is already, as he just pointed out, 5 episodes into Season 5. So Alex humbly requested that Amr keep his thoughts to Star Trek towards the end of his email so that he can listen to all of his other thoughts and then skip the Star Trek stuff so that he won't get spoiled on anything. And I said I wasn't going to, force that upon Amr. I was going to, obviously he'd listen to the email and we'll see how he feels about it. And he has clearly decided to honor Alex's request. So yes, we'll get to the Star Trek thoughts at the end of Amr's email. All right. Good deal. Thank you, Amr. But let's get into the rest of it. You said first I'll get started with Daredevil. He says this was a strong first season so far. By far my favorite episodes were the ones fully done by the Overhaul team. Episode 1, Episode 8, and Episode 9. The first 15 minutes of Episode 1 were top tier in my opinion. It really pulled me in right away. After finishing the first 2 episodes, all I kept thinking about was those opening minutes. I'm also really liking the score done by the Newton brothers, especially how the opening credits feature a new rendition of the Netflix Daredevil theme. Yeah, I mean, the first 15 minutes of Daredevil Born Again, like, drawing everybody in. Yeah, it had the same effect on all of us. It was a very, very effective start for that show. He says after the first episode, we won't see Matt inside the Daredevil suit until the 6th episode, which makes sense, since the entire show is about Matt's inner debate about letting the devil out or not, and just trusting the system to let justice take its course. Regardless, he says Matt Murdock's actions outside the Daredevil suit have kept me hooked. It's a testament to how strong the writing and character development are. Episodes 3 and 5, he says, have been other standout episodes for me, but still the ones fully done by the Overhaul team overshadows them. Episode 3 just turned into a legal drama, and a good one at that. That ending was shocking, yes it was. The Punisher copycat, who we find out was Cole North, shooting Hector point blank in the head, is just absolutely menacing, and I really love that the episode ended with the sound of the cookies that Hector previously mentioned, making it even more heartbreaking. Episode 5, the one set during St. Patrick's Day, he says was like a great bottle episode. I enjoyed Matt's dynamic with this episode's surprise appearance from Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's aka Ms. Marvel's dad. I found this episode to be very well paced, he says. I was hooked from beginning to end. A lot of the consensus online was that this felt like a filler episode, and people criticized it for that, and I don't necessarily agree. I found this episode to be quite enjoyable. Yeah, I talked about that on Flightbox. I don't agree with it either. I thought it was an excellent episode. I think it is definitely more respectful to call it a bottle episode, but I really liked it, and I quite honestly I didn't think we were going to see that much of Yusuf in the episode. I thought when he appeared at the beginning in the as the loan officer to deny Matt his hopes for more money, I thought that was it. The fact that he was in the whole episode, like from start to finish, and was really a big part of it, I really liked that. That was, I mean, you can hear my thoughts on Flightbox with that armor, but yeah, I really did like that episode as well, especially that particular dynamic between Matt and Yusuf, for sure. He says, as for episode 4, the conversation between Matt and Frank Castle was brilliant, and the best thing about it. I've seen it widely praised online, and I definitely agree. The emotional weight behind their exchange was on par with some of the best moments from Season 2. Seeing John Bernthal back as Frank Castle was a treat. His portrayal of the Punisher still brings so much intensity to the show. John Bernthal is a damn good actor. Yes, he is. Thoroughly agree. And Frank Castle is probably many of ours favorite of his characters that he's played so far. Episode 6, he says, we finally see Matt back as Daredevil as he goes to save Hector's niece from Muse. The moment where Matt contemplates saving her himself as Daredevil or do the right thing and call the cops only to say F it and finally embrace the devil inside him and goes to save Angela from Muse was really great. The fight between Daredevil and Muse was really good also. Yes, completely agree. Episode 7. My only comment on this episode was how surprised I was that Muse was killed off and now his story is over. I really thought he'd be around for much longer. I feel his character fell victim to rewrites and reshoots made by the Overhaul team. Maybe it was just me, but I could tell there was originally more to him. Still a decent episode either way. Yeah, I have to be honest, Ahmed, I really didn't care that much with respect to whatever changes were made to Muse. And I know that some of the comic purists out there, and I'm not saying you are one, Amr, but I know a number of the Marvel comic purists expressed the same, disappointment that his character was already over. But to me, I didn't need this season to have a big bad like that. And I'm not necessarily saying that you did, Amr, but I just think that a lot of the people that were disappointed that Muse was ended like that in that episode, they wanted a big bad. They wanted some type of menacing other villain that wasn't Kingpin, because Kingpin, ultimately they figured was just the string puller. Well, no, it turns out that Kingpin has been the big bad this entire time, as I'm sure you found out as you talk about episodes 8 and 9, and you said these last 2 episodes, in my opinion, were visually stunning. He said Bullseye in episode 8 was great. The song that played in the end credits was really stuck in my head after I was done watching. The Daredevil and Punisher team up in episode 9 was awesome. I very much like the apartment fight with Daredevil and Punisher against the Vigilante Task Force. The sheer brutality of it from Punisher was jaw-dropping. Another holy shit moment for me, he says, was Kingpin's murder of Commissioner Gallo. Yikes. That was something you expect to see out of the boys. I hope the comparison doesn't fail me. No, it does not. The MCU is definitely the murderverse now, like you previously mentioned with the LMAO emoji. Side note, I was really baffled when people were calling the Snyderverse that. Like, really? You can't be serious. Yeah, it's more that hate marketing and that revisionist history and that narrative pushing that we talked about earlier, Amr. But he says, I'm definitely excited to see what Season 2 has to offer. One thing I know is it will be a much more singular vision rather than half original team and half overhaul team's situation in terms of the story and structure. With Season 2 having a more unified approach, we could be in for something even more intense, refined, and emotionally gripping, he says. There's so much potential for the show to dive deeper into the existing characters while also expanding its universe. If they keep the momentum from the overhaul episodes, then we're in for an incredible next chapter. Yeah, and I mentioned this a little bit too, Amr, but as far as like all the inside baseball, the behind the scenes stuff in terms of the division of labor, if you will, with respect to, like you said, the original team and the overhaul team, to me, I didn't focus on that. Like I didn't catch it. I forget who it was. I think it might have been Stu Little that mentioned like he could see the seams where certain things were cut here and there. I didn't notice and really don't care to be honest with you. And that's nothing against anyone that does see the seams, whether it's yourself or Stu. But for me, I approach it differently. And I came to that realization like a couple, like after it was all said and done when I was reading Stu's email about a week or so ago. It's like, I don't look at it that way. I just judge the whole thing for what we actually have and not necessarily for what we could have gotten or what we got before changes were made in that regard. The only exception really to this is, Zack Snyder's Justice League, and that is a whole other, like, that situation is so unique and so much of an exception that's the only time that I would be interested in something like that. But everything else, where it was a choice that was made, somewhat mutually, or at least a course was changed in that regard, and no bullying was involved in that regard, like that's just it's a different ball of wax for me in that regard. But either way, glad you enjoyed season 1, and we are all looking forward to season 2. He says, that concludes my thoughts on Daredevil. Not much to say. I've listened to all the Daredevil Flightbox episodes, and I don't think I have anything more to say other than what you've already said in your Flightbox episodes. All right, so we are done with the Daredevil portion of Amr's email. So, Alex, for you, this is where the Star Trek portion will begin. This is your cue to skip ahead, Alex. Do not listen to the rest of Amr's email from this point. Skip forward. All right, enough of a warning. Here we go. Amr says, now on Star Trek. I've watched the first 5 episodes of Season 5, and while I wasn't able to zoom through it like I did with Season 4, I'm still loving what I'm seeing. I gotta say, never in my life have I heard someone as excited as you were, Ray, in the last Friday Flight episode regarding a show I'm watching. I'm really happy you enjoy reading through my emails, and I'm glad you now consider me a Trekkie. So let's begin. Dude, you're 4 full seasons and 5 episodes into one of the most popular Star Trek series of all time. You are without a doubt a Trekkie. But here, I want to hear what you had to say about episode 1, Redemption Part 2. You said, this episode was an awesome opener to the season. You were right, Ray. I wasn't ready for who Denise Crosby was playing. Going into this episode, he says, I thought she was just recast as a Romulan since I found out that Star Trek isn't shy about recasting old actors to play new characters, but this wasn't the case. I was wrong. Let me walk you through my experience. Okay, here we go. He says, I'm watching the episode and get to the point where the Enterprise finally faces Seela's ship. For people who don't know, Commander Seela is the character that Denise Crosby plays, the Romulan character starting in this season. He says, Captain Picard orders to hail the ship. The ship answers, and it's Seela. Then it hits. Picard watches in amazement and says, Tasha. Seela replies saying, no, I'm not Tasha, but the woman you call Tasha is my mother. And then my jaw drops, and I mutter, how in the world? In complete astonishment, he says. We later find out that Tasha is actually her mother, but not our Tasha from Season 1. It's the alternate timeline Tasha from yesterday's Enterprise, who went on to board the Enterprise C. Seela is the product of a Romulan and Tasha after she was taken prisoner when the Enterprise C went back into its original timeline. Confusing at first, I know, but still shocking. Yeah, It's one of the most ingeniously diabolical twists that they've ever done in Star Trek. You take a premise of an episode, Yesterday's Enterprise, that was a complete accident. They ran into the temporal anomaly, the Enterprise C comes out of the rift, and it's an alternate universe where Tasha Yar is still alive. And that crew makes a decision that Picard from that militarized universe allows Tasha, after Guinan tells her that Prime Tasha died an empty death, a death without purpose, allows her to go aboard the Enterprise C. And none of us at that time, like even when I first watched Yesterday's Enterprise, none of us at that time thought that there would be any like dramatic implications for that. And then come to find out, boom, you created an entirely whole ass antagonist and villain for you to face off with based off of one decision. One silly little decision. You let an alternate universe Tasha Yar go back into the prime timeline 22 years in the past. She gets captured when the Romulans defeat the Enterprise C, takes a Romulan lover, or Romulan really takes her as a lover. They have a child. She tries to escape with the child. They catch them. They kill Tasha, but the child is raised as a full-blooded Romulan, even though she's really half. And yeah, now she is like the most diabolical Romulan villain to start season 5. Yeah, twisted. Absolutely. And what makes it even more twisted, Amr, of course, is that our Prime Universe crew of the Enterprise has no idea. Remember the whole meeting where they were like, no, she's got to be lying. That can't possibly be her, right? And this is before she beams aboard and tells Picard the story. But the rest of us as the audience were like, oh, wow. That you seriously? What they did with the mirror universe, or not mirror universe, it's not mirror universe, pardon me, but what that alternate universe Enterprise did actually created her, created this, right? And she's not lying, it's completely true. And also, Amr, I want to add for context that Sela is also the one that has been in charge of these Romulan anti-Enterprise operations. Like, remember the episode where Geordi got brainwashed? She was the one standing in the dark. That was her, right? She has been causing the Enterprise problems since about halfway through season 4. And now it's ramping up because now we know who she is. And now she's tried to leverage that against them publicly, as she did in this episode. Yeah, it was a hell of a way to start season 5. And it was a hell of a way to bring Denise Crosby back into the fold, as a recurring character for this season. Yeah, it was an incredible twist. Still one of the most mind-bending, time-twisting twists that they've had with respect to the franchise as a whole. I love it. It's fantastic. And Denise Crosby, she's aces. She's amazing. Definitely a great Star Trek veteran. Episode 2, Darmok. Oh, the classic. Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra. He says this episode introduces a new alien race, the Temerians, who communicate entirely through metaphors. It was a very interesting concept and added a unique twist to the episode, he says. I really enjoyed Picard's interaction and bonding with the captain of the Temerian ship, Captain Dathan, which adds to the sadness regarding his fate by the end of the episode. I also have to mention how much I love Picard's jacket in this episode. It's stylish and I really want one. Like, really want one. Someone get me that jacket. Yeah, Darmok, I believe, was the first appearance of the casual captain's uniform. You will see it many more times going forward through the rest of this show. And what it is, Amr, is if we go back to the original series, this is a tradition where captains have a more casual form of their uniform that they can wear aboard ship. In the original series, generally speaking, Captain Kirk would wear his gold tunic, but on occasion he would wear a green tunic with kind of a belt at the bottom with a Starfleet insignia. That was his more casual look because it was more of a V-neck, and he was still the captain, and it still denoted that he was in charge, but it wasn't the same like buttoned up like militaristic look. It wasn't as clean cut as the others. It was a little bit more relaxed. This is TNG's version of that. The Picard will have, and what I like about it is not only that it's suede, right, with the leather, but also that underneath he's got like this dark gray version of the uniform and tunic, right, that like bands at the waist. Like it's a cool look. I agree with you. That jacket is cool. And they do some other versions of it as well when we get all the way to Star Trek Picard for the Paramount Plus shows over the last couple of years. But yeah, I'm with you. That is a classic jacket. That is an awesome jacket. And trust me, Amber, you can find a version of it. That it is. If you think that jacket hasn't been sold and like reproduced by many other companies worldwide, you can find that jacket. You can definitely find that jacket for sure. How much it will cost? I don't know. Depends on where you buy it from. But yeah, Picard's casual look is definitely one that you will see a lot in this season and going forward. So just get ready for that. Episode 3, Ensign Ro. Oh, yes. This episode introduces Ro Laren. Ensign Ro Laren, he says, a rebellious new character who might end up being one of my favorites, he says. I really enjoyed her interactions with Guinan, which brought a lot of emotional depth to her character. I was surprised to see her again in episode 5, as I initially thought she would be a one-off. Hopefully we'll be seeing more of her as the season progresses. Oh, you will. Oh, you will. She absolutely is a recurring character, mostly in this season, but she will pop up again later. And her arc is very intriguing and very enriching, I'll put it that way, with respect to not only in terms of like her character and the implications and the impact that she has on the franchise here in TNG, but also the impact that she had kind of indirectly on another franchise, because literally the Ensign Ro character kind of led to the creation of another character of a different Star Trek series. We'll get to that, Amr, should you decide to continue forward past TNG. Hopefully so, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But glad that you like Ro. She is awesome. Michelle Forbes, awesome in that particular role. Yes, you will see much more of her for the rest of the season without question. All right, episode 4, Silicon Avatar. Oh yes, crystalline entity. This was a sad episode, he said, especially in regard to Dr. Kyla Marr. Her grief was very palpable, and I found her interactions with Data to be especially compelling. At first she was quite antagonistic toward him, not because he was an android, but because of her prejudice stemming from the actions of his brother Lore. That added a fascinating and uncomfortable layer to their dynamic. I was saddened by Dr. Marr's actions in the end. Human grief and emotion can be very powerful and can so easily cloud judgment, he says. It genuinely felt like the crystalline entity was very happy to communicate, perhaps for the first time. There was something strangely beautiful and eerie about the crystalline entity finally trying to communicate. That tonal shift in the music, the quiet awe from the crew, and the moment of genuine first contact. And then Dr. Marr overrides the whole process and destroys it. That moment was gut-wrenching, he says. Dr. Marr chose vengeance instead of discovery. Data's final words to her were harsh and cold, but they were also undeniably true, he says. His line, I do not believe you would be happy or proud. I cannot understand your actions. I will never be able to. You have destroyed something that could have been studied and understood, was one of the most emotionally impactful moments of the episode, he says. Delivered without malice, it was brutally honest. It was like a reverse Spock moment, the emotionless being holding up a mirror to the emotional human, and what she saw wasn't noble, it was horrifying. That final shot of Dr. Marr standing alone after everyone walks away really drove it home. A tragic end for a woman whose pain led her to destroy the one thing she had dedicated her life to understanding. Amr, I gotta tell you, I mean, not that other fans haven't like broken down this episode, like, you know, in with its complexity, but that is one of the most insightful like breakdowns of Silicon Avatar that I have heard, and you're 1000% correct. You're absolutely spot on, and that is what makes that episode heartbreaking. And it's, I don't want to say it's a throwaway episode. It's definitely one of the. I've mentioned before about how I think season 5 of TNG is the strongest season of the show by far. I really do, and episodes like Silicon Avatar are part of why I say that, because even when we're dealing with all this other stuff with the bigger baddies and the bigger, you know, overarching plot lines and characters, we get episodes like this, bottle episodes, and this is kind of a bottle episode that also calls back to Data lore in season 1, which is the first time we saw the crystalline entity and the first time that we saw lore. Like, this callback to that, you know, there's not going to be anything that comes forward out of this because it's over, right? It's ended. But yeah, everything that you're talking about in terms of, you know, it being heartbreaking and gut-wrenching, yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very powerful episode in that regard, and especially in terms of the way it does not have a happy ending. It has a very sad and, you know, depressing ending. And not all Star Trek ends happy. A lot of Star Trek ends conflicted and emotionally complex in that regard. And that's one of the strongest parts of the franchise itself, to do that. And then we come to episode 5, the fifth and final one that he watched for this week, Disaster. Ooh, this is one of my favorites. I love this episode. And so did he. Amr says, I absolutely love this episode, especially because it's one of those classic Enterprise problem-solving stories where the ship faces a major crisis and the crew has to adapt quickly in separate high-pressure situations. This was a great episode for character development as the ship faces a crisis and the crew is forced to step up in unexpected ways. I really enjoyed the humorous moments between the crew, especially as they struggled with the ship's disaster. One aspect I liked, he said, was Deanna Troy's storyline. Watching her suddenly confronted with the reality of being in a position of command was fantastic. I appreciated how she had to step into a leadership role, facing doubt from the crew, but ultimately growing into the responsibility. It was refreshing to see her character stretched in a new way, and it added real depth to her arc. It was also great to see Ensign Rolaren return, he said. Her presence added a unique dynamic to the bridge scenes with Troy, as her blunt, no-nonsense perspective contrasted sharply with Troy's more diplomatic approach. Their conflict, especially about separating the saucer section of the ship, was one of the more intense and thought-provoking moments. Yeah, and I also want to highlight Colm Meaney's presence as O'Brien in this episode, because like that was the grouping, the bridge grouping, right? It was Troy, it was Ro, and it was O'Brien, right? And mind you, you've seen O'Brien enough in this particular, like, in the show Armor, that you know that he is a strong recurring character, right? Transporter Chief, Transporter Room 3. But like he's clearly got enough of an understanding of engineering, and like he's not Geordi, but he's like Geordi light in that regard. And so he provides the other perspective. And it's almost like, with the Troy stuff on the bridge, it's almost as though she's got like O'Brien as the angel and Ro as the devil, right? It kind of. It's more complex than that with the both of them, because it's not like they want to separate the saucer and strand everybody else. But Ro is saying they need to because she doesn't want to die. And O'Brien is saying, we don't know that everybody else is dead yet. We can't do that hastily. And it's not our call, it's Troy's call in that regard. So I love the difference in perspective, and like the grouping. That grouping was like, obviously because they were on the bridge, that was like one of the strongest groupings of all the different storylines that happened in this episode. But yeah, I don't want to forget him in regards to all of this, because he definitely was part of that. And as big of a part as he's played so far in this show, his character definitely has a lot more moments to shine in this particular season, and this episode is definitely one of them. Amr says the subplot with Picard and the children stuck in the turbolift was another strong element. Yes, I agree. We both enjoyed how it showed a more vulnerable and human side of Picard. His discomfort with children gradually giving way to genuine care was heartwarming and even a little funny. It gave us a rare chance to see him outside his usual composed captain role. Overall, these parts of the episode were really wholesome. Yeah, and quite honestly, this is a turning point for his character, because even going all the way back to Encounter at Farpoint, he tells Riker that he's not a family man, but Starfleet has given him a ship with children aboard, and he's not comfortable with children. And we've seen how awkward he is, especially in his early interactions with Wesley Crusher early on in the show. He just does not do well with children, and he still doesn't up until this episode. This episode and this incident with him and the kids changed his perspective, right? You see how he is at the end of it, where he gives the girl that wink, because she responds to number one, even though he was talking to Riker, and he's established that bond, and now he definitely has a different perspective with children, and this has changed him as far as making him more humanistic to that. It's arguably some of the greatest character growth I've seen, like, that is produced in this particular episode. He says the Geordi and Dr. Crusher storyline was another great segment. I really liked their interactions as they tried to solve the problem in the cargo bay. It balanced urgency with clever teamwork, and their dialogue showed how well these characters work under pressure. Yeah, they were kind of, there wasn't a whole lot of character development with them, but it was definitely the problem solving. You're absolutely right. Was definitely there for both of them. And to be fair, Geordi and Dr. Crusher definitely by this point have gotten a lot of their own episodes to flesh out their characters, and Geordi maybe more so than Beverly at this point, although Beverly will get some more, no doubt about it, and so will Geordi. But yeah, this was mostly a problem-solving situation. And then, yeah, you had the comic relief coming up here. You said, finally, the scene where Worf delivers Keiko's baby was hilarious and memorable. His formality and bluntness contrasted with the intimacy of childbirth in the funniest way. Lines like, congratulations, you are fully dilated to 10 centimeters, you may now give birth. And his reaction afterwards added a brilliant bit of levity to an otherwise intense episode. Oh, I love that. Yeah, that line... And also when he's telling her to push, and he's like, push, 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 and she just screams, pushing. I love it. It's fantastic. The levity that you do need in an episode that is heavy, where like, literally disaster is the title everywhere. But yeah, no, that was a great part of it, and a great story to tell, for Molly as she grows older and as we see the O'Briens evolve. And we do see the O'Briens evolve. And Amr, if you would like to, I'll just say this again, if you would like to see the O'Briens evolve past TNG, then you can certainly move over to another Star Trek TV show later on after you finish TNG. But we're only in season 5, so we'll get there, good sir. But he says, in short, every subplot in Disaster was fun, engaging, and offered a unique look at different crew members. It was a showcase of the TNG ensemble at its best, each character rising to the occasion in their own way. That concludes my thoughts on TNG, he says, and with it concludes my email. As always, it's been a blast diving into both of the shows I've talked about, each offering something completely different but equally compelling. I'm excited to continue watching and sharing more thoughts as I go along. As always, I really appreciate getting to talk about all of this with you. It makes the experience even more fun. Looking forward to whatever comes next, he says, both in the MCU and in the Final Frontier. We have Thunderbolts coming out soon. I still have Andor Season 2 on my watch list. I will start that very soon, and most definitely still excited with whatever adventures I'll witness with the Enterprise. Regards, Amr Osama. Yes, thank you as always for the good thoughts, Amr. Yes, we do have Thunderbolts coming out soon, and you're 5 episodes into season 5 of TNG, and you've just scratched the surface. You've got a whole lot of goodness, whole lot of greatness, in my subjective opinion, coming up. There, some of the most classic episodes of TNG and of the franchise in general happened in this season, and I think you've hit one of them for sure. Disaster is definitely one of them. And Darmok. Disaster and Darmok, those are 2 of the more heralded episodes of the entire franchise. You've got about 4 or 5 more at least coming up in this season, and I cannot wait to hear your thoughts on them. Looking very forward to that. Thank you for your feedback, as always, good sir. Looking forward to more of it next week. All right, next up is Stuart Little with an email titled, "This is where the fun begins." Oh, what could he possibly be talking about this week? He says, "Hello. Andor spoilers follow." Here we go. Yes, Andor spoiler warning. Andor season 2 spoiler warning. We're diving into Andor season 2. All right, this is your final warning. Andor season 2 spoilers ahead. All right, here we go. Stu says, "Tony Gilroy, you son of a bitch. You got me," he says. "You had me not worried per se, but curious. Those first 2 episodes of Andor season 2, I was having fun with them. But that in itself was a bit weird because I didn't consider Andor Season 1 a fun entry in the Star Wars franchise. It was a telling of the more serious, dramatic, and even desperate side of the Star Wars Rebellion story, with an emphasis on the emotional toll of living under the Empire and the sort of moral complexity involved in working to bring it down, with a more practical emphasis in production. So when Season 2 opens with a slightly comical and haphazard theft of a TIE fighter, and then Cassian gets stuck with a bunch of doofus freedom fighters and a notable different feel to the visual identity to things, I was wondering a little, is this the same show? Like I said, I was enjoying it," he says, "but I was questioning how much of that grit and tension from the first year we'd see. Only for episode 3 to kick me in the nuts with attempted sexual assault, Brasso's death, Mon Mothma's family drama, and her having to allow a bit of murdering on a childhood friend at the hands of the new Doctor Who companion." I didn't know that, Stu. That was a spoiler. Thanks for that. "I felt trolled in a good way by the EDM party music contrasting the stark, well, this is a shitty situation visuals of the closing montage. This is the kind of emotional damage I watch Andor for. Just hook it into my veins." Yeah, Star Wars shouldn't all be like it is, it says, but I am incredibly grateful that there's some of the feeling carried by Andor. And the aforementioned funner stuff is very welcome too, and a logical progression as Cassian is now in the thick of things, and it's nice to see him being more than a survivor and more hopeful and inspirational to the shipyard tech who helps him with the theft. And I look very much forward to K2SO's arrival. The jumping between different plots to show the levels of the conflict is balanced as well as ever. The wedding is a great way to put a lot of the public faces of the rebellion together in one spot and deal out tension and complications, he says. The Imperial Conference with the pre-turn of Ben Mendelsohn as Krennic shows the mundanity of a dictatorship's evil as they consider the Gorman issue in terms of practical consequences instead of the moral ones. Andor's friends in the farmland shows the ground-level effects of the Empire. By comparison, Deidre and Cyril's awkward dinner is a funny domestic interlude, but it also shows her coming into her own power. I think Krennic and Partagaz's asides with her have her finally starting to not worry about being timid and are emboldening her to be more direct to get the results she wants. And with how perceptive she's been depicted before with tracking Axis, that sort of empowerment should make her a real threat to Luthen and company for the rest of the season. An adaptive release schedule of 3 episodes per a week is also very welcome here too. Yeah, jury's still out for me on that one because that's a lot to watch and then record an episode. As you know, I tried doing it this week and I had to postpone the episode until Thursday, so we'll see how it goes for the next 3 weeks. But yeah, I mean, it's great to watch, but not necessarily great to watch and record right after. But we'll see how it goes. But he says, but enough about that Lucasfilm property. Time to talk about another Lucasfilm property, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, the video game finally out on PS5 after an initially Xbox exclusive debut last year. He says, I have to say it's an incredible achievement as both a video game and an Indiana Jones entry, especially after some initial skepticism from the approach. When it was revealed the game would be a first-person perspective unlike most other Indiana Jones games and that it would downplay action, there was a bit of trepidation, but they really managed to pull off an immersive take on the Indiana Jones world that is fun to play and feels incredibly true to the spirit of the character. The Great Circle story is set between Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade, and opens with Indy interrupting a Latin-speaking giant played by the late great Tony Todd, stealing an artifact from the museum of Indy's day job. This sets Indy on a quest to unravel an ancient mystery concerning how various historical sites around the world are connected in some way that makes it that if you were to draw a line through them, it would create a perfectly aligned circle around the world. This is key to some great power that Indy is in a race against, who else? The Nazis, led by rival German archaeologist Emmerich Voss. Working alongside Italian reporter Gina Lombardi, you go to such places as the Vatican, the Pyramids of Giza, the Himalayas, and several other places. It's a great yarn that gives you the feel of the movies and widens the focus to a few other cultures and historical events of that period that maybe don't have a light shown on them enough in Western media, including a sharp left turn in the middle that puts Indy and Gina in the middle of an incredibly intense moment in the time they have to survive. The Great Circle is a well-done mystery, he says, and when you get to the gist of why it's important later into the game, it's cool, but by the end, the full picture and its connection to something you'll definitely be familiar with is a great aha moment. It's also full of fun callbacks and foreshadowing of things from the movies and touches on Indy's dealing with, or not, how Marion left him due to his adventuring causing him to neglect his personal life. The gameplay is again surprising, he says, as they opted to go more in an adventure exploration route than action. You traverse large levels with multiple ruins, military camps, local destinations, and so on, discovering clues, traversing tombs, and solving greatly conceived fun puzzles. Stealth is favored over combat, but when you have to get into the action, guns are optional, but less refined and definitely less fun than using your fists, whip, and a multitude of objects strewn about, and the areas are designed with lots of choices in fascist bashing fun. Oh, I love that phrase. Fascist bashing fun. We should have more of that these days. At any rate, he says it hasn't gotten old yet, clonking a Nazi over the back of the head with a shovel, guitar, broom, and so on, nor has casually walking up to a guard while in disguise and shoving them off a ledge they're standing on. Yes, Nazis suck. Nazis are terrible. And doing horrible things to them will never get old, because they deserve it. Moving on. He says, the game is visually superb, with well-done faces of the main cast, and the score is pitch perfect, getting enough John Williams feel and being pretty restrained in its use of the main theme. He says Indy is played by Troy Baker, an actor prolific in this medium and voice acting in general, and who you'll know from his role as Geoforce in Young Justice. Hasn't he also voiced the Joker a time or two? I think so. He says Baker's voice as Indy is spot on, to the extent that Harrison Ford has publicly praised it, as an example of how AI isn't necessary for such things and is much better. Indy's charm, grit, humor, and vulnerability are all done immense justice to, which is helped by the writing that enables all those things and also takes the time to address the modern critique of Indy as a cultural pillager. Indy's knowledge and respect for the culture he visits is emphasized, and there's multiple points where he gets to aid the locals in preserving their history and artifacts rather than just taking them for himself. Alessandra Mastronardi as Gina is a wonderful companion, and the arc of their relationship going from begrudging allies to something deeper is nice to see play out. Mario Skavrilis as Voss is a perfectly hateable villain, he says, and being an archaeologist Nazi makes him a bit of a hybrid of Belloc's smugness and the over-the-top fanaticism of his creed, and he's depicted as dangerously manipulative and sadistic with his ability to read people. Tony Todd's character Locus is full of presence and mystique, and his role in the story and eventual revelations about what his deal is was lovely too. The cast is great all around, and even a few people I know from other things, most notably Veronica Mars and Galaxy Quest actor Enrico Colantoni as Father Antonio Morello, a friend of Indy's from World War I, who helps him get into the Vatican. Enrico Colantoni is also in Just Shoot Me. Just throwing that out there. I am a fan. And of course, come on, Mathazar from Galaxy Quest, absolutely. He says, additionally, from watching the credits and seeing a dedication to him, our white tiger, Camar de los Reyes, may he rest in peace, also has a voice role in the very cool opening of the game, so it was nice to see him honored alongside Todd. Overall, I can't say enough good things about this game, he says, and given how well it's received, I hope they make future entries beyond a story expansion that's planned at some point. There's definitely some aspects of it that could be followed up on in another story, as well as just how rich and open Indy's life is for more to be done. He says, I will end with saying I loved Sinners 2 and agree with pretty much everything you said, and will add that spoilers, here we go, spoilers, spoilers for Sinners, spoilers for Sinners, okay, there we go. He says, I'm not even mad about how Grace let the vampires in and got all those other people killed. I totally get where she was coming from, and her going out in flames, staking a vampire, was one of the most badass parts of the film for me. Take care, Stu. Stu, I will be honest with you, when that moment happened in the film, it it didn't hit me initially, right? Like she screamed, right? And then there was that moment where Remick like kind of had that chuckle, and it was the delayed realization of what she had done. But at that point, I wasn't interested in like blaming her or being mad. I was just intrigued to see where it was going and how they were going to deal with what she had just done. And yeah, obviously it's relatable. I think the second that they threatened her daughter, because she was still out there, and not only that, but also the fact that she wanted to leave in the first place, when the trouble really started, with what happened to Smoke, or not Smoke, what happened to Stack, that is, pardon me. But like, you know, I'm not like, I'm not one of the people. I mean, there are people on social media that hate her and just have absolutely no like quarter or remorse or any type of understanding. They're just like, she is proof of this and proof of that. And I'm not going that far with it. I'm not. I see where they're coming from and I get why they're angry. But it's the trolley problem. For people who don't know what the trolley problem is, Stu, I'm pretty sure you probably know. The trolley problem, of course, is a trolley that has to go down one of two tracks, and depending on whether or not you pull the lever, it will either kill one person going to the left or a bunch of people going to the right. So, do you kill one to save many, or do you kill many to save one? And those are your only choices. And yeah, I think it is a good illustration of the trolley problem, and it's a far more complex situation than a lot of people want to say about it over the internet, for sure. But yeah, Sinners, unbelievable, fantastic film for sure. But yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, and also thank you for sharing your thoughts on Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. You said this is it's on PS5, but it was initially an Xbox exclusive, which means I should have already played it. But video games, man, I've talked about the list of like shows and movies to watch. If I add video games to this, I won't have time for work, and I have to work. So I don't know when I'm going to get to play it, but I would love to play it. There's so many video games I need to play. Oh, that's a whole other section of the list. Whatever. But no, I'm glad that you enjoyed Great Circle. And as far as your thoughts on Andor, I didn't really have a whole lot to add to that. It was pretty thorough in that regard. So we'll wait for next week to see how it all shakes out. But thank you as always for your feedback, Sue. Greatly appreciated indeed. All right, people, here we are. Grab some popcorn, kick your feet up, and just settle in for this one because it has been weeks since Mr. Anthony Dorsey has contributed to the feedback circle, and he sent a doozy of a missive of full catch up on a number of things just the other day. And my goodness, not only did he send an email missive that might be the longest email he's ever sent, perhaps, but then he also sent a follow up, an addendum, if you will. And the addendum isn't long, but the email itself, yeah, we fully deserving of the Dorsey name, right? The Dorsey-like email, Dorsey-sized in that regard. So here, without further ado, let us dive in. Let us welcome Mr. Anthony Dorsey back to the feedback circle that is now called Friday Flight. His email is titled, I'm Daredevil, not even God can stop that now. But trust me, that is not the only thing he's going to discuss in this email. In fact, the Digital Raven was so weighed down delivering this one that a leg almost broke off, I'm pretty sure. But here we go. Anthony says, hello there, Ray. I have returned after another hiatus caused only by me. I wish I had some life updates to share as a reason for the delays, but I do not. I want to start by saying RIP to Val Kilmer. I don't care what others say, but he was a great Batman. I didn't grow up in that era and only watched Forever during the pandemic, but I was surprised by how much I liked it after hearing how cheesy it was for years. Yeah, we revisited Batman Forever a couple of years ago over at Squadcast Media, and we all, I think, kind of collectively agreed that it's definitely gotten a bad rep from being associated with Batman and Robin, but it is a stronger movie, and I think more people kind of have adjudicated it later and seen, subjectively speaking, that it is a stronger film than Batman and Robin, and one of the stronger entries. One of the things that I would agree with that I've said is that Kilmer arguably has the best balance between Bruce Wayne and Batman. He is an outstanding Bruce Wayne. He really is. He's a very good Bruce Wayne in this film, better than even Michael Keaton. And I know that that's sacrilege to some people, but no, that Forever definitely deserves further readjudication for anybody that hasn't done so yet. It really is a much better film than we gave it credit for back in the day, and I still look forward, hopefully at some point eventually, maybe, to seeing the Schumacher cut, which we know exists thanks to Akiva Goldsman and others confirming its 2 hour and 40-minute runtime at some point. But either way, Forever, yeah, definitely one of the more highlights of Kilmer's career, even if he didn't personally think so in that regard. But Anthony says, before I get into what I watched, I wanted to talk about the Avengers chair reveal. I'm sure we were all surprised by the names included, he says, but the OG X-Men cast having several returns was certainly a surprise. While I'm excited to get more X-Men in the MCU and that cast was iconic, but I wish it was a new permanent cast rather than legacy actors being brought back for nostalgia's sake. Let's get the new Uncanny X-Men started already, enough of the multiverse of nostalgia. I kind of feel you on that, Anthony, because even though I know I'm going to enjoy the nostalgia just as I did, just as I have with any of the previous, like the Spider-Man stuff, obviously, and No Way Home, and certainly the characters that we got in Deadpool and Wolverine, I've thoroughly enjoyed the nostalgia, especially from like the Fox universe in that regard. But yeah, I'm with you. I am concerned about the delay that this does, set in motion for the Uncanny X-Men, for the actual MCU incarnation of the X-Men that I personally am still looking forward to even more than, the Fantastic Four. And in fact, John, like, to go back to your email earlier, if you're still listening, yeah, I that's what I'm really like. Now that I would be excited for. That is where my enthusiasm will definitely ramp up for the MCU, is when they finally start developing X-Men stuff, like actual in universe 616 MCU X-Men cast in that regard. So yeah, and please, for the call them the Uncanny X-Men. Do that, please. The Uncanny X-Men. But I'm not ready to say enough of the multiverse nostalgia because I'm still going to enjoy it. I know I am, and I don't know about you, Anthony, but I that's where I sit with it. I'm with you. I don't like the new Uncanny X-Men being like pushed aside or delayed, but I'm also going to enjoy that nostalgia. I'm not going to lie. So it's 50-50 for me in that regard. All right, so next up, he's got an update on Dune Prophecy Season 1, which has minor spoilers. I have not watched this show, so we'll see how minor these spoilers are. I probably won't remember them. But he says this Dune prequel show on HBO/Max was quite anticipated after how stunning I found Dune Part 2 and Part 1 to a lesser extent. The simple fact that I forgot to write about this show until months after the fact should give away that it left me underwhelmed. Oh, all right. The premiere did surprise me, as I don't know Dune lore, that the state of the universe basically starts with a Terminator-esque machine rebellion leading to a ban of thinking machines and other high-level tech. Even things like a small spider robot child's toy are seen as an almost treason to have. The show focuses on the sisterhood that later becomes the Bene Gesserit. They're very much like in the films, but there is much more infighting going on. Personally, I didn't love that these were the characters that were in focus, especially as the lead, as I didn't find them very sympathetic and they weren't characters I was rooting for. Great acting, though, he says. I did find some of the reveals throughout the show interesting and surprising, but was mostly bored throughout this first season. That is until the finale, which I found excellent and really saved the show for me. What started as a show I really pushed through because I was trying my best to find the positives finished in a way that I will gladly watch the next season whenever it starts. 7.5 out of 10. Well, your review definitely just took like that immediate turn, because that's intriguing. I'm like, wow, he didn't really care for this. But at the very end, no, it brought it back up. So, all right. It looked like it was going to be a failing grade, but you gave it a 7.5. So, all right. Fair enough. Next up, Marvel Rivals. He says the new Overwatch-esque hero shooter starring Marvel characters has sucked me in like so many others. I would have gotten on even sooner, he said, if I knew I could play it online without having PlayStation Plus. They should advertise this fact better, he says. The game already boasts a strong roster of characters, including iconic Avengers like the main six from the films, but also X-Men like Wolverine, Magneto, Magic, and Psylocke, and lesser-known heroes like Squirrel Girl, Luna Show, and Jeff the Land Shark. They also have a very steady stream of new characters added, with the whole Fantastic Four being added throughout season 1 rather, and Emma Frost and Ultron in season 2. The devs recently said in the lead up to season 2 that starting in season 3 there will be a new hero added every month, which is insane. There are, of course, plenty of microtransactions in the game, but they've made it quite possible to unlock what you want without spending much outside the battle pass. I also appreciate that there is a storyline to this game, he says, to make the characters battling each other make sense. The overarching story centers around two versions of Doctor Doom battling it out for control of the multiverse, but also season-specific stories, with Season 1 having Dracula take over Manhattan and the Avengers and Fantastic Four working together to stop him, and Season 2 will be drawing heavily from the Krakoa era of X-Men, having Ultron, rather than the mutant-hating organization Orchis, attacking the island during the prestigious Hellfire Gala. All that said, the game is just a lot of fun even if you don't care about the story or paid skins. I don't know if that one is going to be on my radar, Anthony, but thank you for the review and the recommendation. Perhaps others listening will be intrigued. Okay, here we go. This is a show that is on my radar. Silo, seasons 1 and 2. No spoilers. Thank you, because this is on my long list of when I get to Apple TV Plus, because, wow, so much to watch on that. But at any rate, he says, starring Rebecca Ferguson, this dystopian drama about a society living in a single silo following an unknown nuclear disaster, maybe there wasn't, was a great binge watch with fantastic acting, some good twists, and was simply a thrill to watch. It's not the best sci-fi show I've watched, but excited for next season, 8 out of 10. Okay, it's another rousing vote for Silo. I've been told I should move that up on my list. Again, my list just on Apple TV Plus alone is incredibly long, as I've watched, none of it except for one film, Greyhound, starring Tom Hanks, World War II naval film that came out in 2020. But at any rate, here's how far back Anthony's feedback catch-up is going. He's now about to talk about his thoughts on Captain America Brave New World, which of course opened back in February. Light spoiler, he says. I think we're past spoiler moratorium on that one, but either way. He says, despite noticeable reshoots and a lack of hype, I enjoyed this first outing for Sam Wilson as Captain America, even more than Black Widow. Though I felt this was discount Winter Soldier with obvious twists, weak stakes, a super smart villain who was constantly wrong, and a forgettable soundtrack. While I was disappointed with the finale, the Falcon and the Winter Soldier handled the characters and storylines so much better, and I wish the people who made that show were more heavily involved in this movie. I don't know all the details of the reshoots, but watching Brave New World, it seemed like it was nearly as reshot as Justice League. Luckily, the final product is nowhere near that cinematic disaster, and it lacks the toxic set of the JL reshoots. Yes, important to note that Marvel reshoots don't go the same way that that one did, at least not that we are aware of, okay? Because it's definitely a more producer-controlled universe, as the DCU is about to become, right? So, Anthony Mackie, he says, did a great job in the role, and he made the movie worth watching. Love Harrison Ford, but I felt like he was really showing his age in this movie, and it made me a bit sad. Oh, I don't know if I agree with that. But he says he had some great bits, but if he was 10 years younger, he would have taken this role to another level. Maybe that's because I've watched Shrinking, where he's an aging psychologist with Parkinson's, and that's affected my view of him in this. Also, what a waste of Giancarlo Esposito. He had one cool action scene when he ambushed Sam out of costume, but they didn't need to waste an actor of his caliber in a sub-boss type role like this. In the end, I found this movie to be a good time in the theater, but was ultimately forgettable, and I wish better for Sam Wilson's Captain America, as I was really hoping he'd destroy the haters with a killer film. Not the worst of the MCU, but it's currently sitting at 30 out of 48 on my MCU ranking. I do have high hopes for the other MCU outings this year, though. 6 out of 10. Okay, so let me pull up my rankings again, because you mentioned that you liked it better than Black Widow, and I don't remember where I have it ranked. I will tell you, though, Anthony, that you're ranking 30 out of 48, you're including the shows. I'm not. I'm actively not including the shows, and I don't care if people think that that's fair or not. I'm treating the movies differently at this point in time, because shows are shows, movies are movies, and yes, they're all in the same universe, but I almost feel like the shows deserve their own list, because I don't think it's entirely fair to compare movies and shows. But in my rankings, I remember that I had Brave New World 20th. I do. I have it 20th, which is really close to the middle of my MCU rankings as a whole as far as the movies. And you know what? It's funny. Okay, I actually had Brave New World one slot ahead of Black Widow, because I have Captain America Brave New World at 20 and I have Black Widow at 21. How about that? So I do like it better than Black Widow, but only by a little, only a hair, right? Only one slot. Interesting, and as far as forgettability, I mean, I got you on the discount Winter Soldier stuff. Although I think Black Widow was way more discount Winter Soldier in terms of structure and plot and orchestrations than Brave New World is. But yeah, it's I don't want to say that it's just a movie that is there. And look, we're not going to be able to do anything about haters of Anthony Mackie's Captain America. They were going to persist regardless of how successful the movie was or not, right? So they can just go ahead and sit in their nerd MAGA corner and cry till the cows come home. He's not going anywhere like he's going to remain Captain America in the MCU for the foreseeable future. So my expectations for like Brave New World were not that high. I mean not to that level. I looked at it and part of this I guess is a little bit of cynicism for like past Marvel marketing. Because years ago we talked before about how misleading their trailers can be and how we can't fully trust what they were showing us in a trailer, like not only just in terms of specific items either in or not in a trailer, but also in terms of tone in that regard. And so to me, like my expectations for Brave New World weren't that high. At least I don't remember them being that high. I thought the potential was there. The potential was there for them to do it. But yeah, I feel when you do it, when you use Christopher Eccleston the way that you did in Thor: The Dark World, which again I like Thor: The Dark World. Where do I have that on my list? Thor: The Dark World is 26th on my list. Despite what you did with Christopher Eccleston there, and despite what you did with Mads Mikkelsen in Doctor Strange, which is right above Thor: The Dark World on my list, 25th. By the way, if you want to hear the breakdown of my entire MCU rankings, that is also available on patreon.com/theflightcast. You can listen to me break down how I rank all 35 MCU films and why I've ranked them there. And of course, when I review Thunderbolts next week, I will give it a ranking at some point as well and add it to the list. But if you want to hear my rationale on this, you can go to patreon.com/theflightcast and listen to that. That's for everybody, Anthony, not just you. So don't think I'm singling you out on that one. But at any rate, like, I think that because of what they did with those actors back in the day, I was prepared for Giancarlo Esposito to not be what everybody was hoping he would be. And I'm not saying that you were hoping he'd be Magneto or somebody bigger, but I'm just saying when we have like stronger actors, it's kind of like, well, we impress upon them what we think they should be or how strong they should be treated. Don't get me wrong, he can pull it off. Yes, I've been a fan of Giancarlo Esposito since before anybody knew him from as Gus Fring in Breaking Bad or as what Mr. Edgar, I believe his name is, in The Boys. And certainly before he was Grand Moff Gideon in The Mandalorian, right? I've known his acting for a long time, back when all he did was Spike Lee movies in the late 80s, early 90s. So I've always known that he's had the ability to do it, and I'm very happy for his resurgence in these major franchises. But that being said, he's not above playing a smaller character. He's not. And yes, he did play a smaller villain who lived. Let's also keep that in mind. He lived. Sidewinder is technically still around and could pop up later in another project, right? So there's that. But to me, like I wasn't. I guess I prepared myself enough that I'm not that disappointed in terms of a character being used like later. Like the way that he was used here is like, okay, well, I get it. He's a mercenary. Do I wish he was used for something stronger? Sure. But I'm not willing to put like major fan expectations on it. And again, I'm not saying that you did, Anthony. I'm not saying you wanted him to be a certain character or anything like that. I'm just saying that I have tempered my expectations with respect to those casting announcements heavily because of the MCU's past. And, for better or worse in that regard. So I was not nearly as disappointed in that with respect to how he was used in the film. So I think that's as much as I have to say about that. Rest of what I have to say is in my Brave New World review, which definitely is, that episode is up on the Flightcast website if you want to listen to that at all for any more of my thoughts, Anthony. Maybe you've already listened to it. Entirely possible, because it's been a minute. But continuing on, Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. Okay, I have not watched this, but I think some of the others have talked about this not too recently. Light spoilers, he said. He says, I wasn't really looking forward to this show as it wasn't canon to the MCU like it was originally pitched to be. It is yet another origin story for Spidey, and the animation didn't look interesting. In the end, I was surprised by how much I liked it. This show acts as an alternative timeline to the sacred timeline when something happens that causes Peter to switch schools before starting at Midtown High, and instead becomes friends with Nico Minoru and Lonnie Lincoln rather than Ned Leeds and MJ. The biggest change occurs when Norman Osborn becomes Peter's mentor and serves a much more active role in his training and heroing than Tony Stark ever did in Spider-Man Homecoming. This iteration of Norman, played by Coleman Domingo, is great as he is much friendlier to Peter than I've ever seen, but still has his usual darker traits, pushing Peter harder than a hero mentor would have, even to the point of changing the word responsibility to respect in that iconic line. Oh wow, with great respect or with great power comes great respect. Ooh. Oh, I like that. I like the darker twist on that. That's intriguing. Okay. All right. He says, I do understand why they separated this show from the sacred timeline, as this allowed them to introduce characters he wouldn't have met in the films before Homecoming, such as the villains Doc Ock, Scorpion, and Tombstone, but also including cameos from characters like Doctor Strange and Daredevil, played by Charlie Cox, and with a Netflix theme music. Oh, all right. They also somewhat kept to the MCU timeline by having the Civil War happen in the background, with Iron Man blatantly working with the government and the Sokovia Accords being enacted. I also love the big reveals that happen in the finale, but won't spoil them. The animation did take getting used to, and the early episodes weren't the strongest, but I'm very much looking forward to seeing where they take this show, as they forged a very unique iteration of one of the most iconic superheroes while still keeping true to the core of the character. 8 out of 10. Well, that's refreshing, because, when they do the umpteenth version of Spider-Man, whether it's live action or animation, you do wonder if it starts to get derivative, and it doesn't sound like this one is. So that's good. More positive vibes that I've gotten with respect to this show. Mickey17, light spoilers. Ooh, didn't see this one in theaters, but I've got the Steelbook pre-ordered. Let's see. He says the highly anticipated Bong Joon-ho film starring Robert Pattinson as a disposable employee sent out to do the dangerous jobs on a colony ship heading to a new world unfortunately bombed at the box office, but I thought it was a fun time at the theater with some good social commentary, he says. I didn't find it as compelling as Snowpiercer or Parasite. I've seen Snowpiercer. I have not seen Parasite, but I own both. Uh, Look for a FLITE review episode on Patreon for Parasite in the not-too-distant future. He says, but the more blatant themes should hopefully hit better for those who need to see a villain, played by Mark Ruffalo, who was such an obvious Trump parody. If you haven't seen it, I'd recommend it, but it's fine to wait for the Blu-ray or for it to be on streaming, which it already is. 7.5 out of 10. Yeah, my Blu-ray is coming in a couple of weeks, so I'll probably wait for that for sure. But yeah, Snowpiercer was awesome, and I forgot that he did Parasite. Parasite, didn't it win Best Picture? I think it won Best Picture at the Oscars not some years ago. And there's a Criterion. I have the Criterion version of that, which I think is in 4K. I just have not watched that yet. So yeah, Mickey17, I mean, the premise and the trailer look very interesting. I just did not get a chance to see it in theaters, truthfully. Timing and whatnot and work and everything. And yeah, it didn't have that kind of hype. It's an original film and doesn't have the Sinners hype. That's for damn sure. But either way, I do want to see it, and I probably will watch it and review it in a couple of weeks when I get my physical copy. So thanks for that particular review. Now let's move on to Invincible Season 3. No spoilers. Thank you. Because, yeah, I am not caught up. He even says that. I know you're not caught up, so I won't spoil anything. Yeah, I only have seen Season 1. I liked it. I reviewed it. But I need to get caught up. Anyway, he says, I feel like the storylines of this show have only gotten better each season, with way more depth into the side characters than one would expect. The animation still isn't the strongest, but I get that if we want this show without huge season gaps, we should accept some lackluster animations and non-critical scenes. That said, I didn't even notice the animation issues people had until they shared them constantly on TikTok and elsewhere, which could be said about most current media, he says. Yes, I agree. This show has great drama, stakes, action, and very compelling characters with an all-star voice cast that grows each season. 9 out of 10. Yeah, I've heard great things about Invincible, and I do need to get caught up, because there's an Amazon list, too, as far as like stuff to get caught up on, which also includes finishing Season 3 of The Boys, watching Gen V, and watching Season 4 of The Boys. Hopefully I can get through that before Season 5 launches, but don't hold your breath, because stuff just comes up, and yeah. Anyway. Anthony says, still on the Invincible topic, I recently read the first compendium of the Invincible comic, which roughly covers about 2.5 seasons of the show. I found it fascinating to read, as Robert Kirkman has been treating the show as a second draft of the series, as most of the same events happen the same, but the show gave the supporting cast so much more depth, with characters like Debbie Grayson and Rex Splode getting so much more agency and complexity, but also giving a certain antagonist an original monologue that adds a ton to his character that wasn't present in the comic. The comic also has certain elements from the early 2000s that haven't aged great, such as Mark and William using words like gay and the R word as common insults which the show has fully omitted. Yes, and understandably so. Not acceptable today, no doubt. The love triangle of Mark, Amber, and Eve also plays quite differently in the comic than in the show, with Amber being much different, including looking like a blonde Eve. And an argument could be made for either version of the romance being better, depending on taste. This doesn't mean the comic was bad, don't get me wrong. It's still a fantastic storyline with consistently good art and much more humor than is present in the show. I'm putting off reading the next compendium for a while since I have a long reading list and I'd prefer not to read past the show, but we'll see what happens. Yeah, I hear you on that. But intriguing, very intriguing. And yeah, it's interesting because that's not the first time I've heard of like creators or writers like treating a live action or a show version of their story as a second draft. Historically speaking, William Gibson, the author of Johnny Mnemonic, he has historic. I learned this in my science fiction literature class many, many years ago in school. That he regarded the Keanu Reeves Dina Meyer movie as superior to his original short story. I disagree, and I once wrote an essay explaining why I disagree for extra credit in that class. I love that class. It's science fiction literature. How do you not love a class like that? However, he kind of was treating it the same way that you say Kirkman is treating Invincible, and is that it's an ability for him to change things and upgrade, like you said, second draft, right? Gibson thought of that the same way of the Johnny Mnemonic film, interestingly enough. So yeah, it's an interesting situation where the visual medium can sometimes give creators another shot at updating their material, even if the original version was popular and like well known and well regarded and sold well. All right, Severance season 2. No spoilers, thank you. I have not watched this show at all. He says after a seemingly endless wait of 3 years, since he's 3 years? Y'all waited 3 years for the second season of that show? Damn. Okay. He says Severance returns with another very strong season. The acting is amazing across the board, but Trammell Tillman, Adam Scott, John Turturro, and Deacon Lockman were real standouts. Deacon, especially after the episode that focused on her, which I'd put up there with the greatest episodes of TV ever. This season had more ups and downs than season 1, which had a steady build up to an epic finale, but season 2 finished off with a feature-length episode that was honestly so good it could have been in the theater, and was such a strong ending that if this was the end of the series, I would have been content. Creator Dan Erickson and EP Ben Stiller have put together such a unique world of mystery upon mystery that this will continue to be the show to discuss while it airs, for however many more seasons they have planned. Even if Apple TV Plus didn't have so many great shows, this would be worth the subscription price alone. 9.5 out of 10. Would have been 10 out of 10, but there was one pretty meh episode that drags it down. Wow, you are a harsh grader, Anthony. My goodness. All right. Okay, look, I've heard not a bad thing about Severance. It's on the list. I'll get to Apple TV Plus at some point. Give me a bit. Anyway. All right, how about this one? Harley Quinn Season 5 light spoilers. Ugh. I think the last full season of this show I watched was season 2. And it's sad because we used to talk about this all the time on DC TV Squadcast. And I even did an interview with Jefferson Friedman, the composer for the show, way back when. 5 seasons of Harley Quinn of a Harley Quinn animated series. My goodness. But Anthony says, yet another great season of this show. There's no season 6 renewal yet, and while I hope they continue on, this season ended well enough that this would be a fine ending. This season follows Harley and Ivy moving to Metropolis and dealing with relationship problems, but never a hint of a breakup. Past vendettas, Lena Luthor, voiced by Aisha Tyler, Superman on sabbatical, and an intergalactic city bottler, voiced by Stephen Fry. I did feel like the main plot this season felt a bit dragged out, and some of the side plots for characters like Bane and Clayface were much less interesting than what they got in past seasons of this, or the Kite Man show. Yes, that's right, there's a Kite Man spinoff. But he says some fans might not like what this show does with the DC IP, but I really enjoy this parody of the DCU filled with wild versions of iconic and lesser-known characters, where somehow, 5 seasons in, Joker is more well-adjusted than Bruce Wayne. Wow, alright. It's amazing how this is the last show made for the DCU streaming service that's still going, when I probably would have bet on that being Titans when they all first dropped. This reminds me that I never watched the last seasons of Doom Patrol or Stargirl. Great show. Definitely recommend catching up, though Kite Man is a must-watch before season 5, as there are connections. 8.5 out of 10. Yeah, need to watch seasons 3, 4, and Kite Man, and then 5. And as far as the other shows, yeah, didn't watch season 4 of Titans, didn't finish Doom Patrol, and what else did you mention? Was that Stargo? Oh yeah, definitely did not finish Stargo. My goodness. Oh, there's too much shit to watch. Moving on. Oh, here we go. Another movie on my radar that I would like to watch. Novocaine. No spoilers. This Jack Quaid-led action flick about a guy who can't feel pain was a ton of fun, with some very clever action sequences, good humor, a decent romance, and a surprising reveal given away too early to only the audience. I really appreciated how original this was, with it being like a comedy John Wick type flick where the hero can joke through getting shot or stabbed because he doesn't feel it. 8 out of 10. I'm now curious about something, because aside from the fact that Jack Quaid is in just about everything, who directed Novocaine? Because this may influence how soon I decide to see this. Directed by Dan Burke and Robert Olson. Who are Dan Burke and Robert Olson? Let's see. An American filmmaking duo. They directed Body, Stakeland 2, Villains, Significant Other. They first met as randomly assigned roommates in freshman year at New York University. Okay, I wondered if this was another case of stuntmen turned directors, and I guess not. Or at least not that I'm aware of. Yeah, first film from Film Nation's entertainment production label Infrared. I wonder who were any of the stuntmen and like Chad Stahelski or David Leitch. Were they involved in any of the stunt work in this? I don't know, because the trailer definitely did seem like comedy John Wick in that regard, and I realize that John Wick is what we use to describe a lot of these. It's like our point of reference for a lot of these types of films, but it just fits so well. Like, nobody is old man John Wick, and that movie's great. It's fantastic. But Novocaine is on my radar because of the premise, and also because Jack Quaid is awesome. I mean, how often do you get to play a major character in a comic book show like The Boys, and a major franchise like Star Trek, and be in the Scream franchise, and be an animated version of Superman in what is a pretty awesome show, My Adventures with Superman? Now, we did talk about that. I think that was the last couple of episodes of DC TV Squadcast that we did, Scott and I. I think that was the last show that we talked about. So yeah, Jack Quaid everywhere, literally, and pretty awesome. So yeah, Novocaine is on my radar. All right, now here's a show that I've heard a lot about but haven't watched. Mythic Quest Season 4. Slight spoilers, he says. I've been a big advocate for this show since the beginning, as I'm a big fan of a lot of the cast and creatives, especially coming off of It's Always Sunny. Yeah, I never got into Always Sunny myself, but I've heard many hilarious things about it. But Anthony says Mythic Quest always did a good job of making the characters relatable, flawed people who change throughout these 4 seasons, unlike the Always Sunny gang. That said, I didn't think this final season was the strongest, so I wasn't surprised by the quick cancellation. I felt like the vibe was just off this season, with the cast being a bit less relatable and leaning a bit crueler at times. Mythic Quest has also had some phenomenal one-off episodes, with the Season 1 episode Dark Quiet Death being a genuine masterpiece that you can watch without watching any other episode, and their pandemic special being exactly what was needed back in that dark time. This season's one-off was fine, he says, but it didn't quite pass the high bar other seasons set. I was intrigued by the cliffhanger for what that would mean for next season, but I'm not too sad it won't be followed up on. Even more, I was shocked that with news of the cancellation, they went back and changed the ending to not be a cliffhanger and effectively erased a very talked about moment within the fandom, thus creating a Who Shot First-esque divide where one version is now gone, unless Apple releases a physical edition that includes that scene as an alternate ending. Anyway, I loved early seasons of Mythic Quest. Season 4 was okay. I'll miss it, but I'm not too sad about it being gone. 7 out of 10. I will be honest, that's probably not one that's on my list. Probably not one that's on my radar, especially if they change the ending. So it is what it is. We'll leave it at that. Okay, this one's a little scary. Black Mirror Season 7 light spoilers. For context, Ray has only seen up to Season 4 of Black Mirror. And I saw Bandersnatch. I did see the movie. But Seasons 5, I didn't see Season 5. Did not even know that they had made a Season 6. And then Season 7 releases. And it's like, okay, all right. But he says, finally, a great return to form for this show, with 6 excellent episodes full of all the heartbreak and existential dread longtime viewers expect from Black Mirror. Common People features a dark story about endless subscriptions and medical debt. Bête Noire tells a frustrating story of gaslighting with an insane ending. And Hotel Reverie is a touching and devastating love story through a classic film lens that reminds me of one of my favorite shows, Westworld. Plaything, featuring Peter Capaldi monologuing an unbelievable story for an hour, which I was here for as a fan of his Doctor Who era. Hint, hint. Yes, he's pushing me to get caught up on that show. Eulogy will be the episode that gives Paul Giamatti an Emmy of all is right in the world, and USS Callister Into Infinity acts as the first direct sequel that this show has done with much less godlike evil than the original and more Ready Player One type adventure than I was here for, and I thought it had a great ending. As always, every episode was so different that I don't think it would be right to compare each one, but I'd probably put Hotel Reverie, Common People, and Eulogy as my top 3 of the season, though I didn't think there were any bad ones this time. Season 7 was their best effort in years, 9 out of 10. Oh, this one's a bit higher on my list to finally get caught up on, and I know it's an anthology series, I don't care, I'm a completionist, I gotta watch the other ones before I watch this one. But I have heard, and I don't agree with this, but I have heard on social media, people have been telling others that are starting with this season to skip the first episode of this season, and I'm not going to do that. That is something that I was also told about the very first episode of Black Mirror ever. Like everybody said, don't watch the very first one. Start with 15 million miles. And I didn't, when I watched Black Mirror originally, I just happened to start with 15 million miles because Daniel Kaluuya was in it. I didn't do that based on what others had told me to skip the first episode. But then I found out later, they're like, skip the first episode. Then I went back and watched it and was like, yeah, that's not as strong as the others in the show. That's for sure. But either way, it's just interesting that I saw some people say that about this particular season, but I'm not going to skip it. I'm going to start from the beginning and I'm going to continue on. And you should know what you're getting into 7 seasons in, right? If you're that far into Black Mirror, then one episode at the beginning shouldn't shouldn't push you off of it in that regard. So either way, looking forward to that. Now, here are his thoughts on Daredevil Born Again, and he's got a lot. In fact, is this the rest of his email? It's almost the rest of his email. He's got a lot to talk about, spoiler filled, with Daredevil Born Again. It's been a week or so, but spoiler warning with this. He says, I'm glad you've watched this show, so I can go in depth. Let's start with the good. There's a lot of it. First off, I'm just so happy Daredevil is back and that they didn't erase the Netflix show continuity as they almost did before they overhauled the production. The highlight of this season was the arcs for Matt and Fisk, effectively making them dual protagonists with parallel scenes showing them returning to their roots, such as the Daredevil vs. Muse and Kingpin vs. Adam scene. Oh, that was brilliant. Yes, I loved that. Those two actors are so perfect in their roles that any issues I or others might have with the show, you just cannot deny that these are the definitive versions of the characters in the same way that RDJ was made for Iron Man. Definitive versions in the MCU, and as far as live action, yes, I would agree, for now. He says the more obviously overhauled episodes at the beginning and end of the season were the best episodes to me. Still, I like the trial of Hector Ayala, R.I.P. He put in an incredible final performance. Yes, he did. Episodes a lot, as well as the divisive bank robbery episode, which was just a huge homage to Inside Man that was even filmed in the same bank. And after a recent rewatch of that film, I saw many other connections. That was the same bank as Inside Man? That's cool. I like that. There's so much more of the inside baseball that you guys pay attention to with respect to this particular show. I just went into it like, hey, let's see what it is, which, I don't know. I kind of find like that's less stressful for me personally. But either way, that's a cool tidbit to know that it was the same bank that was an Inside Man. Inside Man's a fantastic movie. A great Spike Lee heist film. He says the pre-overhaul, lawyer-focused episodes did work really well, and if that ended up being the bulk of the show as originally planned, I think it could have had some compelling drama, but likely it would have been too much of a slow burn over 18 episodes. That part I can agree with. If it was going to be all lawyer drama for 18 episodes, yeah, I think that's a lot. But, I'm also the person that argued earlier today when I saw yet another person on Threads advocate for a 22-episode season of television. In this case, it was The Mandalorian, if I'm not mistaken. I'm like, can we please just knock that off? Okay, 22-episode television is dead and it's gone and it's where it belongs. There's no need for it, especially not with a show like Daredevil. There's no reason for this to be that long. It just isn't. We don't need filler. Just because you want more of it doesn't mean it's a good idea for everybody. But either way, yeah, I'm glad that they cut it kind of in half the way they did, where this season is 9 episodes, next season is 8. I do like that. So he says, I appreciated the Ms. Marvel connection despite it being through an actor with bad allegations against him. What? Really? I'm a fan of Ms. Marvel as a character, and of that show, so any connection to that is cool to me. They also did a good job of not making the original shows, Hawkeye or Echo, to be necessary homework before watching. They do all get references and callouts while also adding context to this show for those of us who've watched it all. There are even references to Jessica Jones and Luke Cage that I noticed. So Anthony, I wasn't aware of like allegations against Mohan Kapoor, the actor that plays Yusuf Khan, Kamala's dad. But yeah, according to this, I found something on some site called KalingaTV.com, which I think is clearly like an overseas like Indian site because he's an Indian actor, and apparently he has been accused of sexual misconduct, which in this case is sending obscene pictures to a 15-year-old. Oh boy, yikes, that is not good. But apparently this is an accuser. Um, a Twitter user accused him of sending obscene pictures to her when she was 15, which must have happened. It says it happened back in 2020. Okay, was not aware of that. Did not know that at all. This isn't even in his wiki, and it certainly is not being widely reported here in the States. I don't know what any of that means, but and I even had to like when you Google search his name and look at the news articles. This article again, not from any major outlet here. It's like 5 or 6 links down, and like it's all stuff from over there, right? Like Kalinga TV, Outlook India. Like there's nothing. Or comicbookmovie.com, I guess, has one article, and this is from 2 years ago. Okay, so yeah, these allegations happened a while ago, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, this might be another, Ezra Miller situation. I don't know. But either way, until something bigger comes of it, I guess it is what it is in that regard. But either way, we don't have to belabor that particular point any further for the purposes of the rest of your email. I just was not aware of that at all with respect to allegations and anything. But he says, following much of the behind the scenes changes, I did find a clear divide between both versions of the show, but I was very impressed that it all still meshed well together to become a good show, even if you could cut out the middle 5 episodes, and you wouldn't really miss much when the Bullseye and Foggy storyline returns in episode 8. Again, not a Justice League scenario. I was a bit disappointed how they ended up wiping away the end of Daredevil Season 3 while still keeping it canon, especially after a rewatch. To see Nadim's sacrifice be made irrelevant is upsetting, though with the very timely political nature of the show, I did not find it too surprising that things would shake out like that, allowing a convicted criminal to walk free and move on to politics. On that note, every scene involving the Punisher or Bullseye was absolute perfection. Yeah, and again, you guys, I mean, are just laser focused on finding the seams in these shows, and I'm not. And I think part of it also, the whole Trump allegory that is clearly in this show, like I was just very captivated by that. So perhaps that helped me, not see the seams that I already wasn't looking for in the first place. That's just how I watch these things, and there's no right or wrong to it. It's just a subjective difference in that regard. But Anthony says the soundtrack from the Newton Brothers, as well as some solid needle drops, really elevated the show to another level, and the new character themes they've come up with are excellent. The cinematography across the board was excellent as well. All right. That ends his positives on the show. Now on to the negatives. He says, now the bad for me stems from what they had to keep from the original version of this show, Foggy's death. I am still delusional, he says, in hoping he's revealed to be alive in a future season, but for now, I don't like this choice, and his absence is felt throughout the show in both an intention and through a lack of any new supporting character being as three-dimensional as him, or Karen, who stole the show in the few scenes she was in. I don't think they needed to kill him to get Matt to drop being Daredevil for a few episodes. As for the new characters, Cherry was good in the trial episodes, pre-overhaul, but after that he just became the guy who only popped in to tell Matt to not be Daredevil. Kirsten was barely a character and didn't at all fill the gap left by Foggy or Karen. And as for Heather, I didn't find her relationship with Matt at all interesting, and her heel turn at the end is not going to leave her in the fans' good graces. To counter that, I did like the side characters Fisk had to deal with, he says, including loyalist turned Tony Soprano Jr. Daniel Blake, Commissioner Gallo as the one man with the balls to stand up to Fisk with a mind-blowing ending, literally. He also reminds me a bit of a family friend who was a New York City firefighter in terms of mustache and personality, as well as BB Urich and her excellent man-on-the-street interviews. So briefly, before getting to the rest of your email with respect to this, I will say that I'm not happy with Foggy being dead either, but not for story reasons. Story reasons doesn't bug me, because I'm fine with that being the catalyst for it. for Matt going away. I don't know. It would be a different dynamic if Foggy was still alive, because the thing is, Foggy would still be the one. Like you'd have to do something to Foggy. There'd have to be something, in my opinion. Something would still have to happen to him, whether it was him getting killed. There would still have to be some type of stakes that were beyond Matt's control that would push him to being Daredevil again. Foggy's death is definitely strong enough for him to walk away from from the mask for a year, right? But if he were still around, yeah, he'd have to some bad luck would have to hit him. Like he just the same way it did Hector, the same way it did the dude that stole the fiddle faddle or whatever that was from the convenience store. Like there would still have to be, like, Foggy would just have to be involved in all the stuff that would push Matt into realizing that just trying to let justice take its course was not going to be strong enough. So I'm not mad at it for story reasons. Story reasons, I'm okay with it. I just don't like that Eldon Henson essentially gets jerked around. I don't like that at all. I think that, especially to have him in like the promotional materials and doing the press tours early on, I just think that's shitty. Truthfully, I don't like that from a business and a fan standpoint. Selfishly, in that regard, I think it works fine for the story. I don't like it as far as the orchestration. As far as expectations for the other characters like Cherry or McDuffie, I don't have those expectations for them. Cherry is supposed to be that voice. Like, he's essentially Foggy, but not as strong as Foggy because he doesn't have as strong of a connection. So he's got to be enough to, be the voice of reason. You can't do this, but not strong enough to keep Matt from doing it in that regard. And I think he's fine in that role. And I wasn't looking for much from McDuffie. McDuffie's just supposed to be his conduit to not being out of sorts. To be the lawyer, right? Like, somebody, you know what it's like? It's like in the wake of Foggy's death, they basically split his character in between Cherry and McDuffie. Cherry is the version of Foggy that said the part of Foggy that says don't be Daredevil, and McDuffie is the one that says be a lawyer, right? They just split that in half. And so if you put them together, maybe they resemble close to Foggy, but not quite, because it's not going to be the same connection. But separately, they're doing half of the job of Foggy that he would do if he were still alive. And so for me, with the way that they orchestrated the story, I have no issues with it. I can't tell you that it was something that bugged me at all in that regard, because as if we're calling them one dimensional and not as three dimensional as him, it's for that reason, because they're literally half, or maybe even less than half, of his character. Maybe they're a third, right? Because if a third of Foggy is saying don't be Daredevil, and another third of him is saying be a lawyer, and then there's a third of him that is Matt's friend, right? So the Matt's friend is gone. That's not there. That's dead. But so that personal connection is not there. But don't be Daredevil is still there with Cherry, and be a lawyer is still there with McDuffie. That's the best way I think that I can describe it. I'm okay with that. In the absence of Foggy, I am okay with that, because I didn't need this show to be I didn't need it to recreate the dynamics of the first 3 seasons of Daredevil over on Netflix. And I didn't want that, considering that it's been a year and things have completely changed. I mean, there's a reason that the Nelson Murdoch page sign crumbles in the opening credits. So I just take it to be, all right, this is a new dawn and a new day, and that's why it's called Born Again, because it is a rebirth from the ashes of what was lost at the end of the Marvel Netflix show. That's how I looked at it personally, subjectively speaking. So that didn't bother me at all, truthfully. But I agree with you as far as all the other side characters as well, including, yes, Tony Soprano Jr., Michael Gandolfini, James's son. May he rest in peace. James, that is. May he rest in peace. But as a Daredevil comic reader, Anthony says, I was disappointed with the way they used Muse. I figured. He says, while I thought the adaptation was very well done from costume to deeds, he lacked the personality of the comic counterpart and felt a bit too generic serial killer. Plus, making him basically a villain of the week after teasing him since the beginning of the season felt like a waste, and that episode was easily my least favorite all around this episode this season, before episode 8 brought it way back up. Again, Anthony, I think I was talking about this earlier. I feel like a lot of people, maybe even exclusively the comic readers, were expecting Muse to be a big bad, and I never looked at him as the big bad. I always looked at Fisk as the big bad. It's like, no, you're pulling strings, but you're doing something that is, you're eventually going to show your true colors, which he did, right? So I never had those expectations from Muse, but of course I haven't read the comics, so why would I have those expectations from Muse? So it did not bother me, and I suspect a good portion of that general audience that has never read the comics, it didn't bother them either. But either way, I get why it does. Why it is disappointing for you and other comic fans of the character, for sure. He says, I do think they stuck the landing with the finale, though the penultimate episode was my favorite of the season. I also don't hold it against the show that there was no Spider-Man or other heroes in the end scene, but I was disappointed by the group of minor characters and random cops being they all had to show. I'm hoping next season brings in some other heroes from the MCU or the Defenders saga, but I'm open to whatever story they have to tell. I still maintain they don't need to do that, Anthony, and I'm not like, it's not a make or break for me, and I'm not hoping for it because, again, and I talked about this in my episode of Flightbox about the cultural significance of everybody that is in that bar and the message that the show was sending with respect to who was going to be on a part of Matt's army to fight this. The fact that it was mostly women and all the brown cops, right? Female cops, Josie, Cherry, and Angie, the one detective, Angie Kim, his old partner, right? Like that's important. That's critical. And of course Karen, right? Like, so I think that for the social makeup, the social political makeup of the show, that is far more poignant than just seeing Luke Cage or Jessica Jones or Iron Fist, right? Like I don't need that. Okay, if they decide to do that, cool, but I don't need that, and I'm not going to hold it against them at all if they don't show up in this next season because, again, the show's called Daredevil Born Again, not Defenders. It's Daredevil, right? So they can do whatever they want. I'm open to their creative freedom, like with whatever they want to do with their story. But if it means not bringing in any of the other Defenders, I'm fine with that. I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm okay because they don't need to. Be great if they did. Like I'm not going to be mad if they do, but I'm also not going to care that much. I'm not going to be so disappointed if they don't, because I am intrigued to see how this regular ragtag group of humans is going to help him fight the Kingpin, because this isn't like a slugfest, guys. This isn't like powers versus powers. This has to be political. This has to be like through the workings. He's the mayor of New York City, and I'm sure that how they did this in the comics was far more comic booky, and maybe they'll go that route. But the way that season ended, I didn't get that vibe, and we'll see how it goes. We'll see how they like address things and move forward into season 2. But no, I'm more in line with this like kind of more realistic social political like angle that they're taking with respect to this battle, and it's not going to be the same fight. Remember, what did he say? Resist, rebel, rebuild, right? Like that to me doesn't scream, Avengers Endgame or even Defenders final episode type battle. That to me screams like, systemic and, more intent, right? I mean, there's going to be action, obviously, but yeah, I dig the social political stuff in this show, and so that's why I don't have an issue whatsoever with everybody that was in that bar at the end of that scene. So I'm good with that. But Anthony says, overall, I did really like the season, despite how disjointed it felt to be. While it is a continuation of the Netflix show, I don't feel like it is completely seamless, as the vibe of this show is very different and it lacks a lot of the grit that was in all of the Defenders shows. I see this more like the comics, where they start the series over with a new number one and creative team who has brand new story ideas plus a new and unique vibe. Same continuity, but a new run. Still, I'm thrilled Daredevil is back, and now that season 2 is in production, I'm looking very much forward to seeing what this creative team can do without having to use others' footage and story beats. If I had to rank this with the Netflix Daredevil seasons, it would be ranked last, but that's a very high bar for me. In terms of Disney Plus shows, I'd put it third behind Loki and Agatha All Along. I do expect season 2 to raise it up some more, though. 8.5 out of 10. I really don't know or care where to rank it with respect to all the other ones, to be honest with you. But I will say that, again, it's just, I don't know. I'm beginning to wonder if like the whole like seamless thing and like finding seams in these shows has to do with how much you guys have read the comics, and that's just how like your brains work with respect to it. Because, and again, no right or wrong, all subjective, but I just don't see it like that. But I've heard Stu talk about it like this. I've heard Jared in some cases talk about it, and I've heard you talk about it in this way now, Anthony. And I look at you guys critiquing this, and there's definitely a part of me that goes, wow, you're being harsh. Wow, you're really just like, you got the magnifying glass out and you're really examining this, and you're like, well, it's not perfect because this is broken and that's uneven and here's this and there's that. And it's like, I don't give a shit, if I'm being completely blunt about it. That's just how I feel with respect to it, because And maybe, it's because I guess for me, I'm more forgiving. I guess that's a better way to put it, right? I'm not trying to be like a dick about this or anything, but just I'm more forgiving in terms of the seams that may or may not that probably do exist from a production standpoint, but like with respect to how I am going to absorb the art myself, it wasn't like I did a full rewatch of like the Marvel Netflix show and then watched Born Again. I did not do that. I do remember a great deal of the Marvel Netflix shows, and I do remember what you're talking about in terms of the gritty nature and the tone, but I don't need it to continue over into Disney Plus because it's different. Like I do recognize that there is a difference between what Marvel did over on Netflix and what they're doing now on Disney Plus, and I'm perfectly fine with that difference. It does not bother me. I don't care about a change in tone because for me, the connectivity. I think I also mentioned this in Flight Box. Is it's all about the actors, right? Continuity for me is preserved when you maintain Charlie Cox, when you maintain Vincent D'Onofrio, when you maintain Deborah Ann Wool, when you bring that connective tissue in, right? Like that to me is like, okay, we're good. And Wilson Bethel as well, add him into that too. Like that type of continuity, and also like referencing events, like BB knowing that her uncle is dead and suspecting that it was Kingpin because it damn sure was Kingpin, right? Like stuff like that. That type of connective tissue is more than enough for me to forgive any seams within the production or any changes in terms of this tone versus the tone of the Marvel Netflix show. And it's not something that I think about. It isn't. And I don't know. Like I said, just when I see you guys critique it, it's just there is definitely that part of me that's like, wow, they're being harsh about this. And then there's the other part of me that's like, well, that's how they feel. That it's I can't tell them. I mean, that there is no right or wrong for this. I can only express how I feel with respect to it and be honest in terms of it. So it's not like I'm coming down on how you're evaluating it or how Stu or the others are evaluating it. It's just I look at it very differently. It's very like it's almost like here. This is a sports analogy, but people who follow football will get this. It's like the difference between Peyton Manning and Tom Brady, both incredible quarterbacks, uh, both Hall of Famers. But Peyton Manning was an extremely tactical quarterback. He'd go to the huddle and assess the defense, call audibles, move linemen, move people all over the place before he'd call the play, right? Before he'd actually run the play. Tom Brady, he wouldn't call audibles nearly as much, and he would just assess and work it through as the play was running. It was very intuitive. Both extremely successful. Obviously, Brady more successful in terms of winning Super Bowls, but yeah, I'm more intuitive, right? And I guess in a geekier sense, it's also the difference between Kirk and Picard. In this case, Kirk is like Tom Brady, Picard is like Peyton Manning, and I feel like you guys are more like Picard, where you're like really analytical and kind of more of the tactician, whereas I'm more like Kirk, where it's just I get a feel for it. It's just intuitive in that regard, based on like what I'm watching, with respect to any of these adaptations, if you will. So neither one of us is right or wrong. Both are successful ways to watch and enjoy our content. That's just something that I've been observing. Just I'm not nearly as critical about this shit as you guys are in that regard. But again, it is all subjective and we all have our own different perspectives. So no good or bad with respect to that. All right, almost there. Star Wars Celebration Japan, of course, Anthony. I would be disappointed if you did not share your thoughts on what happened at Celebration, and that is the majority of the rest of this email. You said Star Wars Celebration Japan, a lot of good news and such from Celebration this year. The new movie from Sean Levy starring Ryan Gosling has been officially announced, Star Wars Starfighter, and I'm very intrigued, he says, but even happier that it will go into production this year and has been given a May 2027 release date. Much more than can be said about the dozen other movies they've announced since the Rise of Skywalker. Excited to learn more details and cast members hopefully soon once production gets closer. Yeah, I'm one of those people that because of all those other announcements, when we start seeing set photos and when we hear that filming has commenced and they let us know officially that filming has commenced, then I will buy it, right? Because about this next thing you bring up, you said we also got new details about the Mandalorian and Grogu movie. I was only really 100% on that when I saw the clip, and I don't know if the clip ever made how much it made the rounds on social media, but I did see the clip that everybody saw at Celebration. I did see that. And you talk about it here. You say, we've learned some more about Sigourney Weaver's character, who is a Rebellion era X-Wing pilot now giving Mando his missions. They did not name her character, but I'm predicting, he says, if she's not an original character, She will be portraying Nora Wexley, a main character of the Aftermath novels and mother of Snap Wexley, who was played by Greg Grunberg in the sequel trilogy. Okay, that makes sense, especially if that's who Grunberg was in the sequel trilogy. He says they also showed a trailer, which I've seen most of through a recording, and it simply looks like this will be an action-packed theatrical thrill ride. Can't wait. Yes, I would agree with that last sentence. That is exactly what I saw as well. From the Ahsoka panel, Anthony says we received confirmation that Rory McCann, the Hound from Game of Thrones, will be replacing the late Ray Stevenson as Balin Skull. I think this is great casting, and I'm glad the character hasn't been written out following Ray's passing. They confirmed that Hayden will return as Anakin, which is great. I hope the rumors of Ewan and Natalie Portman also returning are true. Some plot details discussed show a season full of Mortis gods, more Rebels characters in the spotlight, including Zeb, and a full-scale war with Grand Admiral Thrawn and Admiral Akbar. Ahsoka Season 2 can't be here soon enough. Yeah, that's probably the next season of Star Wars television that I am most anticipating. And today, like, it's funny, I saw the name Rory McCann, and I saw the picture of him as Balin, right? Like the whatever, like, mock-up or whatever it was. And it didn't occur to me until I saw somebody post a side by side that it was the Hound from Game of Thrones. So initially I was like, okay, I'm with you. I am glad they recast Balin. I'm glad that they're not tossing that out. But I will be honest that I'm going to have to get his personality from Game of Thrones out of my head. Because he was so distinctive as the Hound. He was. I mean, he was such a distinctive character and such a foul-mouthed asshole of a character in Game of Thrones. And Ray Stevenson obviously has been characters like that previously in his career. May he rest in peace. But he certainly was not that as Balin Skull. So to see Rory McCann take that over, there is going to be a bit of, okay, I got to get this out of my head, like in that regard. But it is a good sign that Star Wars, is willing to recast in that regard. And I heard from my buddy Craig, who's a huge Star Wars fan, that they did consult the family. They did talk to the Stevenson family, and they did ask permission in that regard, and the family gave their blessing as far as the character to be recast, which, from a production standpoint, do they necessarily need to do that? No, but it is a nice courtesy for them to do that. So yeah, it's a good thing that, they've decided to continue on course with their original plan, despite the passing of Ray Stevenson. So I do like that, and it won't be that difficult for me to get, I think Rory McCann is a good enough actor that he's not going to bring the Hound into his performance of Balin Skull, but it's going to be a bit of an adjustment at first. It will, but I'm looking forward to this. This is definitely the most anticipated Star Wars season of television that I'm looking forward to going forward. However, and I hope you're right with those rumors. I hope that we do get Natalie Portman and Ewan back as well. And it was good. Zeb, we saw Zeb obviously in that Mandalorian and Grogu clip, so that's cool. And yeah, Admiral Akbar versus Thrawn, hell yes, absolutely. I will say this though, this next project that you're talking about does intrigue me. He says we've also got a new animated show announced, Maul Shadow Lord. I wasn't interested in the idea of a Maul show when people asked for it, but now that it is real, of course I'm excited. Sam Witwer is a legend for this role, and the prospect of a show starring him is great. I also saw the leaked trailer for this, and it seems to be very underworld focused, with him training a new Padawan, who could be a canon adaptation of Darth Talon from Legends, just as George Lucas intended for his sequels, while also building his crime empire. Hopefully Paul Bettany and Emilia Clarke reprise their solo roles, or at the very least those characters will be involved at some point in the show to bridge it all together. Completely agree. I'm still on the Make Solo 2 happen bandwagon, even though it probably won't. But yes, bring those two back for sure. I completely agree. Connect it. Don't ignore Solo just because you think that the recast didn't work and you're digitally superimposing people's faces on other actors as habit now. But whatever. Either way, yeah, the animated Maul series, yes, bring me that. That I'm definitely anticipating that, because animated Star Wars is awesome. But remember, I live on the island of There's No Bad Star Wars. And I'm pretty sure that will remain that way when I do finally get caught up on Skeleton Crew. No, I have not seen Skeleton Crew. I will, but neither here nor there. Anthony says the last Celebration news I wanted to mention is the new game, Star Wars Zero Company, a new turn-based strategy game in the same vein as XCOM, set in the Clone Wars era. This has the making of a perfect game for me, he says, especially with the supposed customization of the main character and possibly the rest of the crew, which on the poster includes a clone trooper and a Mandalorian, as they implied you could make the crew all droids if you want. Excited to learn more about the game, but before release, I'll try to check out XCOM or Gears of War Tactics to see if I even like this type of game. I don't, because I'm not big on turn-based RPGs, so this will be one that I actually can skip. But yeah, not that I make it a habit of wanting to skip video games, and I'm just not into turn-based RPGs, to be honest with you. But sounds intriguing. I will say that as far as the premise is concerned. And he says, so ends my first email missive in months. I hope you enjoyed reading or listening to my thoughts on these subjects, and I look forward to hearing your response. Thanks for reading, Anthony Dorsey. And there you have it, the conclusion of the latest Dorsey, the actual Dorsey missive. This isn't Dorsey sized. This is an actual Dorsey missive. And yep, a doozy. As expected, I've been talking just on this one for a little over an hour, but wait, there's more. Remember, I mentioned he sent an addendum email after this called addendum, essentially, Flightbox 1 addendum. He's calling it Flightbox 1 because it's his first email about Flightbox. But either way, here's his return email. He says, I'm back already with a short addendum to my last missive. Not that my latest massive email needed more, but as I'm weeks behind on podcasts, he says, I just wanted to respond to something from your show a few weeks ago. I actually do really appreciate how my name has become synonymous in this circle with long-ass emails. It's nice to be known for anything and that people listen to and are interested in my thoughts on these subjects. He says also to Philip, no hard feelings about the Zack Snyder UFC thing. I like Snyder's films, but nothing about this movie besides his name is anything that would entice me to watch it. I do think it will further harm his public perception even further with his haters and now general audience who will see his name attached to a Dana White project. Yeah, that's a tough one. And that's the thing, because we know where Zack's inclination lies with respect to social political stuff, but he very much has an innocence, I think. That's the best way that I could put it in terms of like the types of projects he does and who he aligns with. He doesn't look at this as any type of political statement whatsoever by aligning himself with somebody who is allies with Donald Trump. He's just doing a UFC movie and Dana White happens to be in charge of the UFC. And yeah, the haters are going to find ways to slam him no matter what. I mean, they've been calling him a rape enthusiast and a Ayn Rand fan and all that. Like they, ever since the statements he's made about other stuff in the past. So unfortunately, Anthony, I don't think there's any way that he could necessarily get around that. Until he actually like comes out wearing the damn red hat, I think everybody's assumptions of him are unfounded in that regard, and I don't think he'll do that. Right? Obviously, I don't think he'll do that. So I think that he's going to get dragged either way by those types of people. And you know what? Fortunately, a lot of them are just online, and the court of public opinion is just on social media. I think in real life, most people still really don't know who he is or care in that regard, as far as the general audience is concerned. So either way, I think he'll be okay as far as public perception personally, but I get your concerns on it. And he says, lastly, for this addendum, Doctor Who and Andor are both back and great. I hope you can catch up soon. I'll give further thoughts when the respective seasons are over. Hope you didn't mind this last minute addition to an already lengthy email. Have a good one. Talk to you later. Anthony Dorsey. Oh, we're well over an hour, Anthony, but it's understandable. I get it. I thought you would mention Doctor Who at some point. You're waiting until the season is over to give your thoughts. And you'll have to give those ones spoiler free because I probably won't be caught up by that point. If I do get caught up, I'll let you know. And I'll also let you know about the Patreon episodes of Flightbox that I post as a result of it to get caught up on the Capaldi era, the Jodie Whittaker era, and the first season of the Ncuti Gatwa era that we are currently in, because that's how far behind I am on Doctor Who, sadly. But Andor, completely, as you have noticed listening to this episode, Anthony, completely caught up on. I'm talking about that weekly on Flightbox. So Friday Flight will be open for Andor Season 2 spoilers once you do get to it at the end of the season. So don't worry about that. But either way, thank you as always for the email, Mrs. Good Sir. It is good to see you back in the feedback circle, and you are always welcome here however long it takes you to send your missives, regardless of what life does in, things and delays and how life gets in the way and still finds a way either way. So thank you for the contributions, and we look forward to your future contributions, good sir. And until then, we will have plenty of Dorsey-sized emails to get through and read and enjoy from our other listeners and our audience here with the Flightcast. All right, next up, we've got Larry Griffin Jr. His email this week is titled, Where in the World Am I? Returning to Theaters and Star Wars. He says, What's up, Ray? In response to last week, yes, I live in the U.S. and have lived in New Jersey my whole life. Thankfully, it's still a blue state, even if my county is red. Boo, lol. Yeah, my state turned red, although, if we're being completely honest with you, Larry, my state's not red. My state is purple at worst, to be honest with you. There's a lot of farmland and a lot of silly people in this state that just really don't understand the repercussions of their actions, and a lot of them are in the FAFO mode, F around and find out right now, and more of them will probably join them, and then there'll be more other delusionals that just don't see it. But either way, I don't live in a red state either. I live in, at worst, a purple state that turns blue not as much as it should, in my opinion. But that's neither here nor there. Thank you for sharing. He says, also, my long time away from the theaters was indeed due to the pandemic. I was freaked out about it during most of 2020, despite using masks and getting the eventual vaccine, along with the stubborn people who wouldn't get them. Even if I was excited about a movie, I was like, nope, I'll wait until the home release. Yeah, 2021, I braved it for a handful of movies, the Marvel movies, of course. I managed to maintain my streak because I did see all of those movies in the theater. I did not do the premiere access for Black Widow. I saw that. I actually double featured that day. I saw F9 that day, and then like I saw an earlier showing of that, and then walked down to the hallway to the IMAX theater in full mask and watched Black Widow. Yeah, I did. I did brave it. I want to say by that time we were vaccinated. I think we were. And Shonda had it at that time, so I mean, she had gotten over it, of course, but yeah, I braved it and wanted to get back out in the world, but I totally understand people that didn't. And again, for all the HBO Max releases at the time that were day and date, any of the ones that I watched, I did not watch it. Like, I didn't watch Suicide Squad in theaters. I didn't watch Wonder Woman 1984 in theaters, even though I could have, because that was when theaters were starting to reopen here in Michigan in like December of 2020. And I did not see Dune. I didn't see Dune Part 1. I watched Dune Part 1 at home. I did not see that in theaters. I saw Part 2 in theaters, and that was phenomenal. But, either way, I understand it. Totally get it, man. He says, yes, like you said last week, Star Wars is generational. You can become a fan at any time, regardless of age. Depending on the era you were born in, that can be your entry point. I grew up with the OG trilogy, he says, so that was my first trilogy, but I love it all so far. If you ask me what my favorite Star Wars movie is, it's The Empire Strikes Back. I'm with you on that one, Larry. Yes, the best of the entire franchise. What's my second favorite, he says? The Last Jedi. Oh, that's a great pick. I love that pick. Fantastic pick, Larry. I love that because that pisses off so many haters. Just the fact that you chose that as your second favorite behind Empire. And yet there's so many similarities, aren't there? Between both those movies in both the OG and the sequel trilogy. I love it. Fantastic pick, good sir. He says, I've yet to see The Acolyte, Andor, Bad Batch, Rebels, Skeleton Crew, or Clone Wars, but I'm sure I'll enjoy all of them. I think you will, good sir. He says, The Acolyte will be the first I check out so I can go, what was so bad about this again? He says, God forbid a woman, of color no less, be the lead on a show. That's too woke, I guess. Is my existence as a black guy woke too, or is that just for TV, lol? Toxic fans and gatekeepers can suck it. Enough with the it's my toy and no one else can play with it but me attitude that some of the older fans clutch onto. Until next time, Larry Griffin Jr. Larry, thank you for the feedback. And hey, you know what? With The Acolyte, I mean, yeah, Manla Stenberg aside, I mean, it wasn't just that she was a black female lead. It was also all the other women, right? That's what scared them so much. That's what scared Nerd MAGA to its core. Too many women and brown people in that cast. That was their issue. Like, it was far too diverse. That's why they were bitching about Ki-Adi-Mundi's birthday. It was just nothing but a racist dog whistle for their bigotry. And you know what? They can suck it. They absolutely can. And it's unfortunate that their behavior probably led to why that show got torpedoed after season one, and if I were Lucasfilm, I would seriously reconsider that, especially when you've got actors like Manny Jacinto going to Celebration and the whole crowd in Japan is chanting, Season 2, Season 2. Yeah, they need to listen to the fans on this because there's a much larger audience that appreciates The Acolyte than there is a bunch of assholes and bigots that don't appreciate what it brought to the table and what it did for the franchise. So I think you will enjoy it, Larry, for a number of reasons. Socially speaking included in that regard. So I can't wait to hear your thoughts should you wish to share them about how you feel about that and the other shows. You know what? I mean, we've got Amr and we've got Alex doing the Star Trek watch throughs. Hey, we can do Star Wars watch through. Anybody want to do Star Wars watch through? I think uh, Rachel Bernatowicz was doing that for a little bit. She was also doing Batman for a little bit as well. Star Wars watch throughs. Hey, Star Wars watch updates. That could happen. Yes, absolutely, totally welcome that. Would love to hear your thoughts, Larry, on any of the shows that you listed because I've seen all of them except for Skeleton Crew. That's the only one I got to get caught up on. But yeah, thank you as always for the feedback, good sir. Looking forward to more of it. And it does look like your emails are going to the right place because I did get this one. So kudos to that. All right. Thank you, good sir. So next up is Amari Daniels, and he's got a Facebook comment and an email. He did send an email this time, which I'm so glad that he sent an email. I would love it if he sent more emails, but either way, I do want to start with his Facebook comment because he commented directly on my review of Sinners first, and he said, quote, Haley Steinfeld is absolutely invited. This film, what a masterpiece. There are so many layers to this, he says. I'm still thinking about it after my larger than normal Saturday screening, and that scene is what's left me thinking. Yeah, there is a scene. Yes, that scene. Anybody that's seen the movie knows what scene we're talking about here. But he says, I didn't think about this until you mentioned it, but what you said about the good ones reminds me of the scene from Fresh Prince where Carlton is called a sellout, and you get that line from Uncle Phil where he says, when are we going to stop doing this to each other? Oh, yes, absolutely. You understand that, Amari, no doubt. And that episode, that's the one with Glenn Plummer where they were pledging that fraternity. And yeah, he stuck it to Carlton and, had that big poignant scene about that poignant monologue about sellouts at the end of the episode that was very thought-provoking and definitely as near and dear to me as, someone that over time has kind of been accused of that, throughout my life, if you will. Not a ton, but yeah, it is. I agree with Uncle Phil. When are we going to stop doing this to each other? Because it's not necessary and shouldn't happen. But Amari said, this is such a thought-provoking film, going back to Sinners. It's only April, but this is right alongside Black Bag as one of my favorites of 2025 so far. All of the music got me tapping my feet like I was back in church. I already want to pre-order it and watch this, not just for the experience, but the conversations it will bring. I would love to see the cinematography of this movie acknowledged because it is stellar and reminded me of Mudbound, another film that you need to be in a mood to watch. Yeah, that's why I haven't watched it either, truthfully, Amari. That's also on that list of movies that, yeah, you got to be in the mood to watch them. But yeah, so Amari definitely enjoyed the Sinners experience so much that after he posted that on Facebook, he also sent this email around the same time. He said, Hey Ray, hope you're doing well. I just finished listening to your review of Sinners, and what stuck out to me was when you talked about the vampire subject as a metaphor for race relations and the vampires tempting the folks at the juke joint with the power to be stronger than any racist out there. When you're living in 1930s Jim Crow era Mississippi, that is a very tempting and appealing offer, but it would come at the cost of losing your life. The similarity to Selling Out hadn't occurred to me until you brought it up, so I just wanted to say thanks for making an already great film even more thought-provoking. I'm already set to pre-order that steelbook, so thanks for bringing that up too. Best, Omari. Yeah, thank you, Omari. And I tell you what, if you go on social media, I mean, the conversations, the good ones, right? Not the clickbait ones, not the rage bait ones that people are doing just for engagement, but the actual thoughtful, insightful conversations about the layers in this film. I mean, I've learned some things myself in terms of what Coogler did, with the imagery and with the stories and the depth with respect to the characters in this film. I mean, it's so good. It really is. It is film of the year. And I'm glad you mentioned Black Bag in your earlier comment, Amari, because I do want to see Black Bag. I've heard good things about it, and it's Soderbergh. I love Steven Soderbergh, but yeah, Sinners right now, I mean, it's only April, but man, it's best film of the year right now, seriously. And I remember, this is kind of like how I was when Children of Men came out, because I remember that was a very early movie, early on in the year. It was like January or February of that particular year that it came out, and I waited all year for a movie that good to release, and it didn't happen. Children of Men was the best movie that I saw that year, subjectively speaking, and I feel like Sinners is going to be the same thing. Like, I would be hard-pressed to find another movie that releases this year, and there's going to be plenty that I see, and there are plenty that I'm excited for outside of the comic book realm. Like, I'm excited for Mission Impossible Final Reckoning. That looks phenomenal. I'm excited for Ballerina, the John Wick spinoff with Ana de Armas. Like, there's a number of other films that I'm excited to watch this year, but I can't see one topping Sinners. even in April. I mean, I'll be open minded for it, but I think Sinners is going to be the best film of the year by far. And I hope it lasts through to award season. I hope there is some recognition that it gets. I really do. I hope it's strong enough and has a strong enough story, a strong enough pull outside this far outside of award season to make it through with all the other awards candidates, and maybe Warner Brothers got to do some more of the politicking for that, and whatever, it's part of the system, so go ahead and do it. Because, yeah, I would like to see Ryan Coogler and Michael B. Jordan and a number of the cast and crew of this film. I would like to see them get recognized. I would like Sinners to be a recognized film. I really would. And you're welcome with respect to the Steelbook. I got that notification a day or two before I saw the movie that the pre-orders were already up for that Steelbook. And, yeah, I couldn't order it fast enough. That will be a part of my library without question, no doubt about it. But thank you as always for the feedback, Amari. You are welcome to post on Facebook, but you are also more than welcome to send emails as well, because I mean, obviously I check emails first, but I will make it a point to make certain that I don't miss Facebook whenever you post on Facebook, or whichever way is easier for you. All right, let's get to Alex De Silva's email this week. Interested in Star Trek, but of course he's got other things to talk about, and he will start off again with sports. He says, "Hey Ray, so it looks like your Pistons lost Game 3 by just 2 points. Oof, that's gotta hurt. Still, being down 2-1 in the series isn't the end of the world and very much recoverable. All right, timeout. Sports talk for a little bit here. Losing hurts in general, Alex. I will start by saying that. I will preface my statement by saying that losing a game in the playoffs, regular season, whatever, losing never not hurts, right? It's always something that hurts in that regard. That being said, it doesn't hurt that much. The Pistons are not supposed to be in this series at all. It's not even supposed to be 2-1. It should be 3-0 Knicks, and they should be winning these games by 10 points or more, and they should be on their way to a sweep on Sunday because they have that much more talent than us. The fact that they don't, the fact that they played as badly as they did in the first 2 games, and we stole game 2, right, at the end of it in the fourth quarter, and the fact that the best that they can do is be up 3-1 if they win both games in Detroit. The burden is completely on them, right? The pressure is completely on them. We don't have expectations, okay? You know the turnaround that we just had that we mentioned last week, going from 14 wins to 44 and completely bypassing the play-in structure entirely and getting that 6th seed. This is all gravy. My only objective for the Detroit Pistons right now in the playoffs is learn. Learn. This is your first time in the playoffs, Cade Cunningham. This is your first time in the playoffs, Jalen Duren. This is your first time in the playoffs, Asura Thompson. Learn. Learn what it's like. Learn what it takes. Learn how the game changes from the regular season to the playoffs. That's all this is. Last night was a learning experience. Game 3, that is, was a learning experience for this team, Alex. And that is the most important part. You've got to get your heart broken. You've got to have some crushing defeats where it's like, damn it, if we'd have just made one less mistake. Damn it, if Tobias Harris doesn't vanish. Like he showed up in the first 2 games at 5 points, 5 rebounds in game 3. If he doesn't not show up, right? If Duren doesn't have a terrible night at the free throw line and miss that inbounds pass, right? They just clean up a couple of mistakes, they win that game and they're up 2-1 and we're not talking about it. So to me, learning experience. That's what I want this Pistons team to do. Learn, and then come back stronger. Trajan Langdon, he's got to get that Robin to Cade Cunningham's Batman. He's got to get that person in the offseason, whether it's Devin Booker or I've even heard some people suggest Zion Williamson and a change of scenery. Whoever it is, get Cade Cunningham a Robin to his Batman and, have 2 stars on the team that can carry the load so that it takes pressure off everybody else, takes pressure off of Beasley, takes pressure off of Schroeder, and anybody else that can, score points in support so that we're not relying on Tobias Harris and we're not relying on Malik Beasley in order to carry us through against a highly talented New York Knicks team that just out-talented us. And that's the thing. They out-talented the Pistons so heavily, with Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns and whoever else, and yet they still only won by 2. So, that to me, the burden of proof is all on the burden of pressure and proof is all on the Knicks, right? And if they lose game 4, like if the Pistons win game 4 and make this a 2-2 series going back to New York, I can't wait to see the New York media lose its collective minds, because there's no way that the Knicks should even be 2-1 in this series. It should be 3-0 and ready to and be poised for the sweep on Sunday, but it isn't because they blew a game in New York, and now we'll see how Bickerstaff and the Pistons respond in game 4 at home. We'll see. But yeah, it's Losing hurts, but not nearly as much as you might think. Our expectations here in Detroit are not nearly the same as the expectations you have, good sir, over there on the East Coast. So, just saying. But let's continue with the rest of your episode. You said, I watched the first episode of Andor Season 2 at the time of writing this, and it's no surprise the show is great. Light spoilers, though. We can go full spoilers, truthfully, because I'm caught up. He says, I like the scenarios the show puts its character through, and I'm looking forward to seeing Cassian's escape attempt from the jungle planet. Also, it's so messed up that Mon is marrying her daughter off at 13 or 14, the things she does for the rebellion. Additionally, Bix and Brasso being worried about governing authorities showing up to check their visas is another sad parallel between fiction and real life. Yep. Well, we'll see how you feel when you finish that arc. You'll have some interesting thoughts, I think, after you watch episodes 2 and 3. Because, yeah, I think the rest of us are watching the 3-episode arcs all at once, Alex, but we'll wait for your thoughts. We'll see what your thoughts are when you get caught up. He says, you said before that you're planning on one day playing and or watching The Last of Us, so all I'll say is be very careful on the internet this week. The most recent episode of the show contained one of the series' biggest spoiler events, and the internet has been going berserk ever since the episode premiered Sunday night. I will be honest with you, Alex, I already know what it is. It doesn't bother me because that is so far down the list. I have so many other shows and so many other movies and video games to play before I even think about getting to The Last of Us. So either I will forget the spoiler by the time I get to that point where I'm even remotely able to play it, or it just won't matter that much, truthfully, because I can't say that I'm that heavily invested in The Last of Us. I think the concept is intriguing, and I love that people are enjoying the show as well as the game, but yeah, I can't say it's that high on my radar in terms of priority, so it doesn't bother me that much. I have seen a lot of people talking about it. I saw a trade actually post a headline with the spoiler in it, and was like, oh, all right, well, I see why people are freaking out, and I won't say it aloud, and for respect to anybody listening that is watching the show and maybe isn't caught up. So, but yeah, it's all good. I'm fine with it. He says, this week for the Next Generation, I watched The High Ground. I like the design of the Ansata laser guns, he says. They look more like traditional Star Wars blasters and less like the Federation's TV remote phasers. Yes, definitely. Done on purpose for sure, for a number of reasons. He also says, I also liked Finn pointing out the hypocrisy of the Prime Directive. The Federation claims to prioritize not meddling in planets' individual affairs, but that's pretty much all Picard and company do. Yeah, that's what Kirk and Spock did back in the day as well. The Prime Directive, it's almost like it's placed there just for the crew of the Enterprise to break it, and for special circumstances, and they get a special dispensation later for whatever actions they've taken in defiance of the Prime Directive. So, yeah, no, valid point. A very valid point. He says, next up is Deja Q, Live Long and Prosper, Alex. That's a fun one. That's a real fun episode. We'll be very intrigued to see what your thoughts on that one is. Good, sir. Thank you for your feedback, as always, Alex. All right, let's close out this week's feedback show with an email from Jared Cardos. He says, hey, Ray, hope you're doing well and had a happy Easter. Yes, I did. Thank you, Jared. I appreciate that. Spent some good time with the family. He says, here's some quick thoughts from some of your latest episodes. Only got one thing I really wanted to reference from Friday Flight, but it's a big one, he says. So while I get what you're saying about each actor playing Batman in the 90s movies were doing their own version and portrayal after Kilmer's untimely passing, I went back and rewatched Batman Forever, and while his take on Bruce Wayne is definitely less outwardly neurotic and more of a public face instead of the Keaton semi-recluse, there are parts of Forever that seem to at least be in dialogue with those Burton movies, especially the 89 movie. For one thing, the brief flashback of the Wayne murders is very similar to the one we see in 89. There's also the cheeky reference that Chase says when she's propositioning Batman, asking if she needs to have on skin-tight vinyl with a whip, of course referencing Catwoman. But what brings this up even more, he says, is Dick's story arc and how he wants to kill Two-Face to get revenge for the death of his family, which comes to a head when Bruce tells him, then it will happen this way. You make the kill, but the pain doesn't die with Harvey, it grows. So you run out into the night to find another face, and another, until one terrible morning you wake up and you realize that revenge has become your whole life, and you won't know why. Dick counters that a maniac didn't murder Bruce's family, and he replies, yes, they were. Jared says, while you can read this whole dynamic between the two as its own thing, it feels like it's referencing what happened in Batman 89, where Bruce got his revenge for his parents' murder in making it so the Joker dies at the end, but it didn't make the pain and the loss go away, and he's trying to stop Dick from having to suffer the same fate. Also, while I do remember the Riddler suit is on display in a scene in Batman and Robin where Bane is getting Freeze's suit in Arkham Asylum, I don't remember if there are any more references to the past movies in that one. Alright, so here's the thing, Jared. I hear what you're saying, and that's a compelling argument with respect to connective tissue between Batman Forever and Batman 89, and even, like you said, Batman Returns. Very true. That still doesn't change the perception of Val Kilmer's Batman, as far as I'm concerned. Nobody says, or at least I don't know anyone. Your argument, Jared, like, of course, never say nobody, because I'm sure somebody out there is saying this, but very few people treat Michael Keaton's Batman the same as Val Kilmer's. They just don't. And we've all seen the same movie. And as you bring up those scenes, as you bring up those references, I remember them. Like, I play them over in my head. I own the movie. I've seen it enough times. I know exactly what you're talking about. And most certainly those lines are true and they do exist. Absolutely. And even at the time when I watched the movie originally, I thought of that, right? Like, I made those connections then. That being said, even with the fact that it does seem like it is the same version, no one treats it that way. Or very few people treat it that way is what I should say. I can't say no one because obviously somebody else has thought of the same thing, Jared. And there's somebody out there, whether they're listening to this show or not, that does treat Keaton, Kilmer, and Clooney as the same incarnation. They do think of it that way. But I think, socially speaking, colloquialism, like when we talk about the Batman eras, there are lines of separation. We separate Burton from Schumacher. We separate Keaton from Kilmer. And I think we also separate both of them from Clooney. That's just perception, right? Sometimes it's not about what is actually there, right? Because here's the thing. I feel like if Schumacher really wanted to make those definitive connections, then he would have said Joker, right? Or he would have said Catwoman. Like, there would have been more direct references than what we got. And I'm sure that from a fan perspective, there's enough there. Like, I'm not saying your argument is wrong in this regard, because it's definitely, all of it's there. All of it is compelling, and all of it is factual. Right? Those things do happen in the movie, in addition to Michael Goff and Pat Hingle, right? But the perception, socially speaking, among even fans, is that Keaton and Kilmer are separate. They're not the same. And there's a lot of changes, right? It's not just, in terms of like the Gotham City itself, but also the cave, the mansion. I mean, all that changes, right? I mean, there's even continuity breaks, massive continuity breaks, between how things are orchestrated between Batman 89 and Batman Returns, right? Because the cave's different, right? I mean, the car and like the gadgets and whatnot are the same, and the suit's the same, but the cave is completely different. Gotham City is completely different. Like, there's enough changes where they weren't worried about continuity the same way. And I think when it comes to the personification of the different versions of Batman, largely we don't worry about it the same way. So while I agree, like, I won't call somebody wrong for, like, if you want to have Keaton, Kilmer, and Clooney listed as like one interpretation, you can do that. But I still maintain that the majority of us treat them as separate. I do believe that. This came up because we were talking about this last week. John brought this up because I made that comment about how many Batman actors we've had in relation to how many Superman actors we've had cinematically, and how it's no contest, and it's another reason why Batman fans should just shut up and stop complaining and stop being impatient about the Batman Part 2, because we have eaten incredibly well over the last 30 years, 40 years, or whatnot, right? But yeah, I think largely we still treat them all as separate. I do. And I don't see any reason to change that perspective, even in the wake of all this evidence, if you will, because we don't talk about those movies in the same right, do we? No, like I said, the lines of separation are still there when we have those conversations. So I think I'm still gonna take that particular route and go that way with it when I have discussions about it. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still different actors, so we can still have that discussion. But if we're talking about interpretations, that's where it really does get subjective, and we can have that discourse, and we can, agree to disagree if one of us really wants to take one way or the other with respect to it, to be honest with you. So that's how I feel about that. Continuing on here, Jared says, on to the most recent FLITE cast, talking about all the intriguing new Star Wars news that came from it. In regards to not doing a Star Wars movie every year, I think there's definitely something to that. Though I do think, considering all the different time periods, there could be some wiggle to fit movies in other periods in if they're ready. For example, it sounds like the Starfighter movie and the announced Rey New Jedi Order movies are around the same time, so I don't know if that would work side by side. But something like that, the Dawn of the Jedi movie that was announced a while back, could. Perhaps, I mean, I don't know. I still question the idea of Star Wars going the MCU route. I do think that for movies, they need to stagger the releases, and anything else that they want to do, like side by side stuff, television, have that for Disney Plus. And you know what? I know that David Zaslav is all against the idea of doing feature length movies for Max, but Disney Plus can, I mean, they can still do streaming movies. I mean, it's not like Netflix is still releasing streaming movies. Amazon is releasing streaming movies. Disney Plus can certainly do the same with Star Wars if there's something that they don't want to release in theaters, right? And that can help still build the event cinema, right? Because like if that's what you're looking for, the big windfalls at the theater, then yeah, you don't need competing interests. That's what I'm looking at it from a business standpoint in that regard. So I think that the Disney Plus is still their outlet in order to help them stagger the other releases while they still can do event cinema theatrically. That's just my perspective on it. Jared says, as for the announcements themselves, I also saw the Mandalorian and Grogu trailer, and it looks like the show, but expanded and blown up, which is exactly what I want for a Mando movie. The only thing I'm still not super into is the title, he says. I get it's referencing the Lone Wolf and Cub manga that inspired the show, and pretty much every old man killer adopts young child to protect them story since, but it just doesn't sound as good as what it's referencing. You know, I'm not gonna hem and haw about the title, and part of the reason I'm gonna be honest with you, like I hear what you're saying, and yes, they are trying to be emblematic of Lone Wolf and Cub, which I actually own that. Like that was part of the Criterion 50% off sale, and I totally like just blind bought it last year. Because I want to watch it at some point. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Like the one part about the Mandalorian and Grogu title that I absolutely thoroughly love is that it further cements the fact that his name is Grogu. Because I kid you not, just today, here, I'll go ahead. Let me read this. I'm going to go to Threads. I want to read. Now, I responded to this post for different reasons, but I did happen to mention this, right? There's an individual that posted earlier. He said, he posted a picture. I forget what season this is from. Maybe it's season 3. But it's a picture of Din Djarin, Mandalorian, on the right, Bo-Katan, Kryze, played by Katie Sackhoff, on the left, and of course, Grogu hovering in the middle, right? And he says, I've said it before and I'll say it again. The Mandalorian show should have been 10 seasons of 22 episodes of Mando and Baby Yoda and maybe Bo-Katan visiting different planets fighting space fascism each episode. Then Disney just has a channel that plays random episodes forever. Now, I don't care if this dude was like being serious or not. I despise the fact that over 3,500 people like that comment because I disagree with I so vehemently disagree with everything in that comment. It just ugh. So it led me to quote it, and I said, I've said it before and I'll say it again. 22 episode seasons of TV are dead, in all caps, and wholly unnecessary anymore. Just because you want filler in your shows doesn't mean it's a good idea for everyone. TV is allowed to evolve. You should do the same, in my opinion. And then here's my last sentence. I said, and his name is Grogu. Baby Yoda doesn't exist, never did. And why are people still calling him Baby Yoda? I'm so done with that. I'm beyond done with that. And no, we're past the point of, oh, it's cute. It's for the general audience to identify. No, his name has been established as Grogu since episode 8 of season 2, The Jedi, right? Since Ahsoka came into the picture and told us his name was Grogu. And we knew from the beginning that he had an actual name, and they told us, you're going to find out what his name is. You're going to find out what his name is. And for marketing purposes, okay, fine. That first season, I get it. For marketing purposes, call him Baby Yoda. But once we find out what his real flippin' name is, call him by his actual name because he's not Baby Yoda. I don't give a shit if people think that's semantics or if people think that I'm being too whatever about it. That's his name. So, at the very least, Jared, I love the title of the movie because it cements that it's Grogu. It's not the Mandalorian and Baby Yoda because Baby Yoda never existed. It's the Mandalorian and Grogu because his name is Grogu. Okay? Just saying. Just throwing that out there. And my goodness, I mean the lunacy of this, and this is why I have to remember that, like, YouTube or not YouTube, but like social media, I have to remember that it's not a real place, and I have to remember that there are people there that just like things for the sake of liking things, and it's incredibly superficial. Because the fact that over 3,500 people liked the idea of the Mandalorian being 10 seasons, 22 episodes, whether he was being sarcastic or not, this is such stupidity. This is absolutely ridiculous. And then Disney just has a channel that plays random episodes forever. I hate this. I hate this so much. And this person is a horrible individual, and may they bang their funny bone in a tired place that makes their arm tingle for like an hour. Because seriously, it's just, I hate this. I hate this so much. 10 seasons of 22 episodes of Mando and Baby Yoda. There's no Baby Yoda. His name is Grogu. I'm getting upset. I'm going to calm down. And I'm going to move on with the rest of Jared's email. Here we go. He says, Starfighter sounds like it could be fun. I believe Levy and Gosling previously did the Fall Guy together, and while I haven't seen it yet, I hear good things. Same here. Taking place a few years after Rise of Skywalker is also a good idea. While I enjoyed some things about Rise, I think a movie just slightly outside the race stuff might help ease the audience and fans back into that time frame. You know, I don't really give a shit about helping to ease the audience and the fans back into the time frame because they're gonna watch it, right? I mean, the general audience is, you have to market it too, and I've seen no evidence that the general audience despise the sequel trilogy the way that some of these diehard fans do, right? And no, the Rotten Tomato score, the audience score for that does not, no, absolutely not, because they review bombed that shit, if I remember correctly. But either way, like with respect to The Last Jedi and maybe even The Rise of Skywalker, but either way, I'm fine with this movie taking place where it is, like in the sequel trilogy, but I couldn't care less about helping to ease fans and audiences back into it. Fans are watching it, even if they hate watching it. It doesn't matter, right? But you need to make a movie that does appeal to the general audience. That is important, and get them into the franchise and build back up that event filmmaking that I was talking about. So that part is important, right? Not the whole easing of everybody back into the time frame. Just go ahead, hey, pull the ripcord, go right back to it. I mean, you've done High Republic, you have done pre-original trilogy, and I think we're still in the middle of pre-original trilogy right now with Andor. You've done right after the original trilogy with Mandalorian and Grogu. So like we're all over the timeline with respect to Star Wars already in that regard. So I feel like they can jump into the sequel trilogy stuff, back into that time frame whenever they want. And as long as you market it properly and strongly to the general audience, that's what's going to dictate your success or failure with respect to that. So he says the new Maul animated series sounds promising. It's a little surprising because I don't think Maul has ever really been shown to have enough character to really be the focus of a show, but this show might put that to the test or add enough for it to work. Either way, I'll definitely give it a shot when it comes out. And while I'm talking about animation, I need to catch up on the Vision series because they look cool as hell. I need to get caught up on Vision as well. I will push back a little bit on the idea that Maul has the idea that he's never been really shown to have enough character to be the focus of a show. I disagree. I disagree. I think there's enough there with what they expounded upon in Clone Wars, in animated form. There's enough there for him to, yeah, I think there's enough to build out a new show, like between his appearances in Clone Wars and Rebels. He was in Rebels too, wasn't he? But yeah, I do think there's enough there. And I think because of what Sam Witwer did with the character in animated form, I think that's where the basis for it comes from, right? Many of us as fans wanted to see Maul's story expounded upon. It. A lot of us still weren't happy that he died at the end of, or was not died, because we know that that's not the case, but that he was cut in half at the end of Phantom Menace, and that he, the idea that he wasn't the Dooku, right? No disrespect to Christopher Lee, may he rest in peace, but a lot of us, I think, still felt like Dooku wasn't necessary because Maul could have done everything that Dooku did until the point where Palpatine dispatched him. Now, the way that it worked, now that we have Maul back, like, we can flesh that out, right? So the stuff that we wanted to learn about him, we can totally learn now, and I feel like we have learned enough as far as, like, stepping stones of his character to be able to build something around him for a show as a protagonist, an evil protagonist building a crime empire. No, I do think there's enough there, Jared. I will push back a bit on that one, to be honest with you. I think it's intriguing. I am intrigued to see how they flesh him out further in his own show. He says there was some news about Ahsoka season 2, mainly Hayden Christensen returning as Anakin. Considering that was mostly what people were putting in headlines, I was a little apprehensive at first. I worried that they might ignore the completely new galaxy to explore to have some more fan service, but after reading more of what was also talked about, it sounds like they're doing more with Ahsoka and Sabine traveling through this new world, as well as Ezra and likely the rest of the Rebels crew, along with characters like Admiral Akbar dealing with Thrawn. So thankfully, it does sound like they're going to be doing some really interesting stuff that I'm definitely looking forward. Um, yeah, they have an original plan that they're going to continue. Like we mentioned earlier, they have recast Balin, so they're going to keep going. But yeah, I fan service is such a tricky thing because I think there's a fine line, and I am appreciative of what the resurgence that Hayden is having with the fandom and in the franchise right now. Like, I'm glad that they brought him into Ahsoka and that they're continuing him through, like, for season 2. Like, I want to see that and more of that in live action. We saw so much of that dynamic in Clone Wars, and it was amazing. And, Matt Lanter and Ashley Eckstein did a phenomenal job, as voice actors for that animation. And now to see it in live action with Rosario Dawson and Hayden Christensen, who have known each other for a long time, I can't wait to see that. And I would like that type of dynamic that, we've never really gotten. The idea of Force Ghost Anakin talking to his former Padawan in live action. That fan service or not, that's going to be amazing. I can't wait to see that. That's going to be outstanding. And all that other stuff is great because it's still Rebels live action, right? That's the thing. Like we talked about Ahsoka season 1 being live action Rebels, and they're going to continue that for sure. And I'm fine with that too. But yeah, it's just I don't have an issue with the fan service. It's always a tricky balance, and I think they'll find a good way to balance that out, to be honest with you, and still keep it appealing for all of us and not just completely devolve into, lazy fan service. I don't think it'll be lazy at all. I think it'll be well thought out. I think it'll be well constructed, especially with the Filoni and everybody involved in Ahsoka, at the helm of it, to be honest with you. So, all right, continuing. He says, I won't go too much into the Fantastic Four First Steps trailer since I talked about it a good amount on the last Friday flight, but I will say that talking about it feeling separate from the rest of the MCU is interesting, because in a way it is, with it being a completely different world with a different vibe. But I get the feeling it will end up being one of the movies that's most essential to Avengers Doomsday and Secret War, and not just because all their main characters and undoubtedly the most iconic villain will likely take center stage in them. Oh, I agree. I completely agree with you on that. I mean, obviously, they're all cast. They're all going to be in Doomsday. So at some point, the connection will happen. It's just that the movie itself, at least the story that we're seeing, will be separate and kind of standalone to start off. And he says, and like you said, while I'm reasonably certain that First Steps will likely be my favorite of Fantastic Four films I've seen so far, I can't say I hate the two Tim Story directed movies in the 2000s. They certainly have their flaws, he says. While I get the temptation of having Doom involved in the accident and the actor has his good moments, Julian McMahon, making Doom a simple American businessman doesn't quite have the same majesty that the character in the comics does. Also, they really didn't do Sue Storm justice in giving her the most basic of motivations and focusing more on her figure. Yep, Jessica Alba, indeed. Other than that, the four main casts themselves are pretty decent at what they're given, and the Toby Jones Lawrence Fishburne version of Silver Surfer was well done. Was it Toby or was it Doug? I thought it was Doug Jones. Was it Doug Jones? Hang on, I need to clarify that because Doug Jones is the um Doug Jones is important, but he's very important to me because he's Saru from Star Trek Discovery, and for years I thought he was the one that played Silver Surfer. Let me just clarify, make certain that I am right on that. Yes, I am right. It is Doug Jones. Doug Jones is the one who played the body, if you will, of Silver Surfer with the Lawrence Fishburne narration. This is before they allowed Doug Jones to like speak in a lot of his big roles, and that's why I mean, he's done speaking roles. I'm not saying he's never done speaking roles, but he's been known as an actor, a contortionist, and a mime artist, best known for portraying non-human creatures, and he still does in Star Trek Discovery, but it's his voice, it's his acting, which I love. Doug Jones is fantastic. I just wanted to clarify that and make certain that I hadn't gotten that wrong. So, all right, cool. Jared says, as for Fan Four Stick, I haven't seen it yet, neither have I. Though I get the feeling that it tried to do more of a gritty, hard sci-fi take on the characters, which I think can work to some degree. After all, their origins definitely have a bit of body horror embedded in there. I'll probably see it before I watch First Steps, and maybe even the 90s Carpenter movie that was never officially released. I'm sure it can be found easily enough nowadays. I think you're right. And I think that's a good idea. I think perhaps I'll watch Fan Four Stick for a Patreon review just before we see First Steps. It's a good idea because I haven't fully seen it either. He says, as for all the wailing and gnashing of teeth over how they're approaching the Silver Surfer in First Steps, some of it is really annoying. Getting past the whole Shalabal of it, who is a character I never really knew about until the initial announcement. Like I said, a lot of Marvel Cosmic is a bit of a blind spot for me. What annoys me most are the people comparing Surfer in the '07 film to this one, complaining about the CGI and how far CGI has fallen. While yes, it does seem like a lot of studios work these VFX companies to the bone, and it can create some less than ideal CGI, it feels rather in bad faith to compare a photo from a press release in the '07 movie to a cropped picture of a compressed YouTube video. You are 1,000% correct on that, Jared. And that's an aspect of this I didn't even consider, because the argument is stupid. The complaints were stupid and misogynistic in the first place. But yeah, it's not a fair comparison. Like you just said, a photo from a press release, so an actual studio released photo compared to a cropped picture from a compressed YouTube video of a trailer. Dumb. Absolutely dumb comparison. But misery loves company, and people love being miserable, so that's where that comes from. But Jared says, I think that'll do it for me this week. Hopefully, we'll have some fun things to talk about in the next with the release of Thunderbolts, and maybe I'll even get to have seen Sinners and catch up on Andor by then. Until then, yes, Jared, thank you for the feedback. Definitely go see Sinners. Definitely get caught up on Andor because, yes, got to talk about all that. And we're going to be talking about both of those for the foreseeable future for a little while. And we'll add Thunderbolts into the equation because, yes, there will be a flight review of that next week for certain, good sir. But as always, thank you for the good feedback. Greatly appreciate it. And that'll do it for a heftier version of Friday Flight. A lot of stuff to talk about, a lot of good emails, a lot of great feedback from everybody. Thank you, as always, to John R., to Anthony Dorsey, of course, for bringing back the Dorsey missive, the actual Dorsey missive, Stu Little, Larry Griffin, Amr, Omari, Alex, and Jared, of course. All of you, thank you for your feedback this week. Of course, it is greatly appreciated. If you are so inclined and wish to join the feedback circle for the next episode of Friday Flight, and if you want to talk about any of the stuff that we talked about, we covered a lot in this particular show. We talked about Celebrations, we talked about Daredevil, we talked about Sinners, we talked about Star Trek, got some Star Trek watch updates, even a little bit of sports here and there, if you will. A great deal that we covered with respect to that, and some other Marvel stuff as well. If you want to join the feedback circle here on Friday Flight, you know where to find me on Threads and Instagram at the Flightcast. I'm also on BLUESKY at just Flightcast. There's also a Flightcast Facebook page. There's the YouTube comment section underneath the post for this episode on the Flightcast YouTube channel. And of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care, stay safe out there, have a great weekend, and I will see you all next time. Take it easy.